All right, good evening, everybody. I'm going to call the August 7th, 2024 Planning Board meeting to order. If we could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so Jeff is not here. I'm going to appoint Mr. D to vote for Jeff. That gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 voting members.
8 members.
And we have a quorum. So we will start with the administrative board work. I have the approval of minutes.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of July 10th, 2024.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Second by Lynn. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Chair votes in the affirmative.
We're all
Meeting
here
minutes have
then.
been approved. All right, next set.
Do you want me to do the 17th?
20, you do the 17th.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to
Oh,
make a
here.
motion that the planning board approve the minutes from our July 17th planning board meeting.
Actually, it's the 18th, isn't it?
July 18th.
It's the 18th.
18th.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Jason. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain, Mr. Chair.
And the chair votes in the affirmative. The meeting minutes for July 18th have been approved, and then we have one more, Mr. D, for June 26th.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to approve the minutes of the meeting of June 26th, 2024.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Art. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I abstain.
Any abstentions?
I abstain.
1, 2,
I abstain.
3 abstentions. How many ayes did we have? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Chair votes in the affirmative, and our meeting minutes from June 26th have been approved. All right, regional impact determinations.
None this evening, Mr. Chair.
Fantastic. And then we have some discussions with town staff. I see that we have an extension request here for 60 Pettingill Road site plan.
That's correct.
So I am looking for a motion to grant an extension request for the 60 Pettingill Road site plan to December 3rd, 2024.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Art. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes in the affirmative, and this has been granted to December 3rd, 2024. 4. All right, and real quick, we do have a master plan committee meeting tomorrow night at 5:30 right here in this room. And next week, I'm going to put Jeff on the spot. I'm sure he's watching at home when he does. But next week, Jeff will provide an update as to where we're at with the master plan committee. All right.
There's probably something I would like to add. I don't know, in the current questionnaire, I don't know if there was enough about agriculture. Because I know one of our previous master plans, there was a section on agriculture. This being an agricultural community way back, we still have 4 working orchards that do retail business, and it's kind of the part of the character of the town. There should be, I think, something on that. Also is the, age, friendly community, which I think Sylvia was part of it when Colleen was here. It was before COVID. We did work with, as far as making the community age-friendly. That's just a very quick overview of it. The other thing is we have a 2004 master plan, which predates the 13 one. And that's probably in more of a traditional format of our master plans. And I think that should really be looked at closely. And also the 97 master plan, which it took off from. There's master plans that go back to 1968, if you really want to get some history. And there's some good continuity there. The 13 master plan was a little bit, different. It has its own expression and everything, but I think you have to kind of look back over several master plans to get an idea of really what this community wants. And then, of course, when we go through the process now, it'll be the current flavor of residents who live here now. So that will add to it. There's quite well, Sylvia, there's a lot to it. So most of the time is spent getting the data together, which explains what you're doing. So you have to-
Absolutely. Ann?
I'd also like to add that in 2013, we had a timeline showing the rich history of the town. I think there should be some facet of the history mentioned in the latest master plan also. I think that would be important in fleshing out where we came from and why we're here and, the reason we love this town and want it to go on and prosper. So,
Thank you.
welcome.
Anything else from the board?
I think in the Ford master plan, there was a 4-pager that Marilyn Ham did. Marilyn Ham was town historian at the time, so that could be.
Chester Ham's wife?
Chet Ham's wife.
Oh, okay.
Marilyn lives in Derry,
Yep.
and she's a good resource on the history of the town,
Thank you.
along with Rick Holmes.
So before we get into old business, excuse me, I'd like to move a couple things around. I'm just going to do the agenda essentially in reverse, so it'll go CBA instead of ABC. Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Thank you. All right, so up first, we have a public hearing on an application for formal review of a lot line adjustment to adjust the lot line between two parcels, 37 Stonehenge Road and 41 Stonehenge Road, zoned AR1. Thomas J. Sensabella and Shauna Den are the owners. Promised Land Survey is the applicant. This was continued from July 18th, 2024. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Great, how are you? Thank you.
Fantastic.
Yep, so good evening. My name is Tim Peliquin. I'm a licensed land surveyor, and my company is Promised Land Survey, and representing the small lot line adjustment on Stonehenge Road. Essentially, there's an undersized lot of about 4/10 of an acre that we're proposing to make 6/10 of an acre, so a little bit larger. And there's a little bit more than a 4-acre lot going down to a 4-acre lot. It's just giving the very small lot a little bit additional room. These landowners have been working together for over a year to come up with this. The plan has been done for a year. Truthfully, there was a large delay based on the fact that a mortgage company had to sign off on this. So there was a long delay. So that's why you might see the date on the plan is August of 2023. We just didn't change that as of yet. We just submitted the plans as is because they were ready to submit almost a year ago. So it's approximately, there's a land transfer called Parcel A. You'd see the details of the areas in Note C, as it's called, where Parcel A is just merely 0.15 acres that's being transferred to the small lot, Lot 123. Very, very straightforward. All lot improvements stay on their lots. Nobody's encroaching on anybody in this area. It just there's no building activity as part of this. So it's intended to be a betterment. We do, certainly to the small lot. We do ask for a few waivers based on various things such as topography, wetlands, high-intensity soils, and the like. And those are seen in Note L, particularly where we're asking for site distance plan and profiles. There's no improvements to the lots, so the lots will stay as they are, other than just some additional areas for lawn and such. So we see this as a betterment. I don't need to take too much of your time. I'll be glad to pause and answer any questions the board would have, or perhaps members of the public. Thank you.
Sure. And then, just to clarify, before we keep going, I know we didn't talk about it, we did accept this as complete a few weeks ago.
Yes.
So, we'll start, this is a public hearing, so we're gonna start with staff, we'll come to the board, and then we'll open it up to the public. Staff,
I have nothing this either.
Mike?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So there are no outstanding checklist items. As you noted, the board accepted this as complete recently. We identify 6 waivers that are being requested and the standard for considering those waivers, and then ultimately have a recommendation that I can provide at the board's pleasure.
Thank you. Sylvia, anything?
No.
Fantastic. I'll bring it to the board. Board, do we have any questions on this? Seeing none, this is a public hearing, so I will open it up for public comment. Does anybody have anything? Seeing no public comment, I will close public comment. All right, so we have to act on 6 waivers. How would the board like to do that? Do we want to do all 6 together, or would we like to take them separately?
Or do them together, I think. There's nothing complex about it at all.
Fantastic. So I'm looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we accept waivers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 as recommended by staff. And the reason is that by granting these waivers, there's no substantial detriment to the public good.
I have a motion from Art. Do I have a second?
I have a second, Mr. Chair.
I have a second from Lynn. All in favor, please say aye.
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 I'll
Oppo-
abstain.
Opposed? Mr. D abstains. Chair votes in the affirmative. Your lot line has been approved. Thank you very much,
Waivers,
sir.
the waivers.
Oh.
Those are just the waivers.
Yeah, yeah. Give me a minute.
You know, you want to get going here. Mr. Chair,
Now I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion that we grant conditional approval of a lot line adjustment plan to adjust the lot line between 2 parcels at 41 Stonehenge Road, tax map 12, lot 123. Owners Thomas Sensabella, and 37 Stonehenge Road, tax map 12, lot 124-13. Owners of the Brown Family Trust, Randall and Jill Brown, in accordance with plans prepared by Promised Land Survey LLC, dated August 22nd, 2023, with the precedent conditions to be fulfilled within 2 years and prior to plan signature, and general and subsequent conditions of approval to be fulfilled, as noted in the staff recommendation memorandum dated July 10th, 2024.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Jason. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed?
I'll abstain again because I was out of the room.
An
Thank you, Mr.
abstention
Chair.
from Mr. D, and the chair votes in the affirmative. Now, thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for your time. Have a good night.
Thank you. All right, we are going to keep moving here. We have a public hearing on an application for a rezoning request to rezone 42 Ash Street, map 10, lot 45, from AR1 to Woodmont Commons PUD Industrial 1. Pillsbury Realty Development LLC is the owner. TC Boston Development Incorporated is the applicant, and this was continued from July 10th. Good evening, gentlemen. How are you?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Nice to see you all again.
Before we get going, we do have to act on completeness for this. So give me 1 minute.
Mr. Chair, no completeness necessary for this one.
No?
Nope.
Okay,
This is-
perfect.
yeah, it's
Oh,
zoning.
this is a rezoning. Yeah, thank you. All right.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. In the board, for the record, my name is Kevin Smith, and I'm a consultant with Pillsbury Realty LLC, who is the owner of the Woodmont Commons Development, and also working tonight in conjunction with Trammell Crow Companies. And here tonight from Trammell Crow, sitting with me at the table is Eli Long. In the back is Peter Hines. And then the civil engineer that is working on this project is Jim Petropoulos, a name you're all familiar with. Pillsbury Realty entered into an agreement not that long ago with Trammell Crow to purchase and develop approximately 113 acres south of the new Exit 4 off-ramp called officially Old Rum Trail. That's old without the E. And
you.
thank you very much for noting that. Before I get too much further, though, into this application this evening, I did want to give Eli the opportunity to talk a little bit about who Trammell Crow is and what they do.
Yeah, hi everybody. Nice to be with you. Thanks for the time for hearing us. We appreciate it very much. We are a 75-year-old national real estate development company. We specialize only in development projects, and we sit in the Boston office, but we cover New England. Everybody in our office is local, despite our national footprint and our Texas headquarters. So we only focus on New England. We have currently have a project in Merrimack in southern New Hampshire. We're big believers in southern New Hampshire as a growth opportunity for New England. So we identified the property with Pillsbury and are going to work towards a new development, which will come back to you guys for site plan approval and all of the regular business. But we're very excited to be here, very excited about the opportunity, very excited about the project, and have had a very good initial reaction with Londonderry, the town. I've had a pre-filing meeting, so feel like we're pretty up to speed on what we need to do and the process in front of us.
So just getting in a little bit to the crux of the application here this evening. This really, in some ways, is a housekeeping item that probably should have been taken care of during the PUD process, but for whatever reason it wasn't. You'll notice there on the east side of where the new exit 4A interchange is going in, most of the property, the underlining zoning on it is industrial, with the exception of about a 28-acre parcel to the south of Madden Road there, which is zoned residential. The PUD does allow the underlining zoning to be utilized as part of the development project in addition to the PUD overlay zoning. And Trammell Crow has been contemplating utilizing that underlining zoning for an industrial use. The only industrial use that is allowed in the PUD zoning is research and development. What this would do is allow for anything from advanced manufacturing, life sciences, logistics, research and development to be developed on that entirety of that parcel. Those items can be developed on the whole rest of that parcel there that is in purple. It just can't be developed on that one AR1 parcel, again, to the south of Madden Road. So this would rezone that AR1 to industrial to match the rest of the entire east side parcel there. And as you can imagine now with the exit going in and almost near complete of phase one, there's a tremendous amount of interest now in this. And certainly happy to answer any questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir. I'll start with staff.
I have nothing this evening.
Staff does not make a recommendation, Mr. Chair, on a rezoning, but we would note that the standard that the board should apply is if the request is reasonable and consistent with the surrounding uses in the master plan, the board can make a recommendation to the town council in support. Conversely, the board can make a motion to recommend that the council deny the request for rezoning if it finds that the request is not consistent with the master plan and the surrounding uses.
Thank you.
So to be clear, this board, this land use board, is not approving or disapproving this zoning change. It's merely making a statement of fact to the town council. Either we kind of like it or we kind of don't.
Correct. I mean, as the experts on land use and planning regulation, I think the council relies heavily on the advice of this board, but ultimately it is the town council's responsibility as the legislative body for zoning.
Okay, just to follow the bouncing ball one more time for the public who's watching TV or screaming at their TVs at this point. The planning board could say, yes, we would like this rezoned, and the town council could say, no, we're not rezoning it.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Not a problem. All right. Anything else from the board? Jason?
So I guess this is a pretty big change from AR1 to Industrial 1. And looking at the map that you provided in your presentation graphics, there are a couple houses on Ash Street that their backyard literally abuts right up to your property. And this being Industrial 1, you know, Kevin, you said life sciences, that sort of thing, but there's a whole range of things that could go into this that are not necessarily life sciences related. You know, it could be some warehouses, it could even be up to a rock crushing business that could literally be in these guys' backyard. And so, can you explain to me why you feel the need to make such a big change from, you know, agricultural residential to one of the most lenient zoning regulations that we have?
Sure. First I would just point out that they could have a hospital in their backyard right now because the PUD does allow for hospital use. They could have, a 1 million square foot office building in their backyard. So it's not like this is going to be residential if it stays with the current underlying zoning, because it would likely be a use that's allowable by the PUD. The idea here is that if Trammell Crow decides to utilize the underlying zoning to keep it consistent with the rest of the zoning in that area, they're looking at trying to make this into a commerce park with industrial uses. Again, the idea is just to keep it consistent. Obviously, there would be a buffer. There's a buffer no matter what the use is that we have both in our regulations and in the PUD regulations. But it's more of just the consistency of if they decide to utilize the underlying zoning in that area.
Yeah, my concern is just in the last month, we had a case with Waste Management where the abutters were running into some serious issues with the existing facility that was there that we had to rectify. And so my concern is we're opening ourselves up for a whole nother issue of this by dropping an industrial zoning right in someone's backyard.
Yeah, I think too, want to be very respectful of those single-family houses to the south of the plan. Our goal is to have everything, all traffic, a very large buffer between those and the uses that we would propose, and drive all traffic would only go to the north. So we would try and stay out of their way, minimize the impact as much as possible.
I respect that, and I have no doubt that you want to do the right thing, but if we make this zoning change, you don't necessarily have to. Right? So that's all.
Yeah,
Thank you.
because zoning
Yeah.
deals with the use of the property. And if whatever they put there, one would have to agree with what's permitted in the zoning, and also what's permitted in the Woodmont PUD. But everything has to come in for a site plan. The site plan is what determines, that's the buffering, and that's where we hear from residents also. That's where we get the details, what goes there. And then it's up to us either to allow it or, make modifications or, there's other, once we hear from the abutters on it specifically, on what they're gonna put on that site, or they might put multiple things, but each one of those things would have to come in for a site plan.
Yeah,
And that's,
I understand.
Anything else from the board? Ann?
I was here for the original Woodmont master plan back in 2000, all through it, from, 2010 through 2013. And what was envisioned for that area was a heck of a lot of green space with a large perimeter buffer, residential uses, a connection to the rail trail, commercial uses with a regional draw, larger format retail and dedicated office uses, shared open space, squares, parks, more connected green space, institutional and office spaces, and of course water detention areas. But it was mostly green. You look at this, green area. I'm just wondering how much more of an impact your proposal might bring in there, as far as the size of the trucks that would be accessing these plants, and how would they traverse the area? Would they be going down to, Ash Street at all through that exit that there would be between the two houses on Ash Streets that are almost on the border with Derry? Or were they coming down that was supposed original main exit area off of onto Ash Street across from Londonderry Road? There is no trucks, no 18-wheelers can go across the highway across Ash Street, the Ash Street Bridge. That's not permitted as it is now. how will this, what you're proposing, impact that area? And the area between the exit right off the highway and Dairy, what will be traversing that area now? That was different than what might have been. And if you could talk about that, and is it possible to keep that area AR1 and put some type of housing for the workers there?
So, I guess there was a few things in that, Ann, that I'll try to
Thanks.
dissect and go through. As far as, access, clearly that's something, no matter how this side ends up getting developed, that is all going to have to be worked out and worked through the site plan process. We're certainly not going to solve that here this evening. Clearly, your main access way is going to be on the new exit interchange, in and out of that whole area there. And I would just remind the board too that, again, you still have that parcel that the underlying zoning is AR1 is about 28 acres. So you still have roughly, 80 or so acres that are zoned industrial, where no matter what you do here tonight, these questions are still relevant, right? Because it's not like it can't be done there. What you see on that charrette that was part of the PUD plan, that's before any surveys are actually done out there. Now that we've done surveys out in that area, I can tell you there's probably going to be just as much, if not more, green space than what is shown in that, because there's a lot of land out there that either the topography doesn't work to be developed on, there's vernal pools, there's wetlands, obviously, that have to be avoided. So to answer your question about the green space, there's going to be plenty of green space on there. When the PUD was approved in 2013, nobody could have envisioned COVID and what COVID would do to the office market. Okay. It's bottomed out and it's never recovered since COVID. Here we are 4 years later. So the market conditions change as well. And I would say that, it's not like Trammell Crow is looking for permission to do something that's not allowed in the PUD. This is allowed in the PUD. They're just asking for the underlying zoning change of this one parcel to keep it consistent with the rest of the parcel. It's not like that AR1 zone has to be utilized as housing because it does have the PUD overlay on it. There's still roughly 80 to 90 acres north of Old Rum Trail that is yet to have a development plan for it as well.
Mr. Chair, just I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I know what you're saying, but it's just such a different reality than what was originally envisioned. There was no industrial in this area. So it's hard to envision a Pettingill Road type scenario there. Am I wrong about saying Pettingill Road? I mean, that's a type of...
No, I don't think you're wrong by saying that, Ann. What I can tell you is that you essentially, when the PUD master plan was created in 2013, it essentially made mirror images of itself on the west side and on the east side. And part of that was because nobody knew if 4A was ever going to be built. You have a whole column in the PUD that talks about the development without exit 4A, because exit 4A was still kind of a pie in the sky at that point. So that was in part on why you had this mirror imaging of the west and the east side developments like that. What I can tell you is that the market, I don't believe the market, at least right now, will support having a whole west side where you have your retail, your restaurants, your hotel, all your mixed use and everything, and then literally a stone's throw away the same exact thing. And I also think that's why the PUD contemplated the underlying zoning being able to be used in case market conditions did change. So I wouldn't say it's out of step with what was envisioned for, at least for the east side. If this were happening on the west side, I would agree with you 1,000%. But on the east side, I don't think it's that much out of step with what was envisioned or could be developed there.
Well, the public didn't have that in their mind way back then because it wasn't discussed. That exit 4A has been in people's minds since the 80s, I believe.
Well, I think that's why most people thought it wasn't going to happen.
Well, it was a matter of getting the funding and who would pay for what, so.
Thank you, Ann. Mike, you had something to say?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm sorry to cut you off.
No,
Ann.
that's okay.
That wasn't intentional. A couple of just points that I think everybody should bear in mind. Ann rightly noted open space as an objective that's contained throughout the master plan, the PUD master plan. This is the land use plan for the Woodmont Commons 12 area, which encompasses the area that we're talking about. And it has a requirement for something like 76 acres of open space between conserved open space and shared open space. It's important to recognize that reverting to the underlying zoning does not remove the parcel from the PUD. It is still in the PUD. It is just that the zoning ordinance specifies that the underlying zoning is allowed as a permitted use within the PUD. So there would still need to be compliance with the objectives that are contained in the master plan, which include walkability, interconnectivity with the rail trail, open space, and what have you. So I just wanted to make that clear as this discussion continues.
Thank you, Mike. Giovanni?
Kevin, so you're going to, well, it's industrial one, right? That's what you're seeking, and the rest of the parcel is industrial one. So to Jason's point, could rock crushing operations exist in a industrial one zone?
Technically, anything that is currently allowed in the industrial zone would be allowed there.
I don't think you can do rock crushing in
Yeah,
an
I would
industrial
agree
one.
with that. I think, so the planning, I mean, the core function of the planning board is to protect abutting uses from noxious fumes, vibration, that kind of an operation. I mean, that really, I think that the planning board in this area could, again, theoretically, the planning board responds to, and the staff respond to projects that are presented. But I think I would be surprised if the planning board could sustainably approve a rock crushing operation in this area.
But per the permitted uses, it is under section 5.8, it is allowed in there.
I think it may be a permitted use that the planning board could sustainably approve in the middle of nowhere. I don't think it's a permitted use that the planning board could responsibly approve here.
But what's your target market?
Not rock crushing.
Can't imagine
I
you're
obviously
spending-
was using that as an extreme
Can't imagine
example,
you're spending
but
that
one
much
that's
money
viable.
for that.
So,
Yeah,
That type of use.
we envision this to be a commerce park with an industrial bend to it, right? I mean, we think based on what we've seen on our other project, there's a lot of interest from manufacturing, life science. It's not necessarily going to be all logistics, but we don't know that. But we think there's a lot of job creation that comes with this opportunity, and it's not, it's not rock crushing. It's not going to be anything that's going to be terribly disturbative to the neighbors to the south. We're just trying to get this one little piece to match the vast majority of the site, which we could do some of the uses that you guys are, mentioning and are nervous about, but we don't think that it does differ from the PUD, no doubt. But we think what the opportunity lies is quite frankly a lot of job creation.
But we're looking for not just job creation, jobs that you can live off of, you know? Afford a home in Londonderry.
Yeah,
That's the type we're looking for.
that's what we believe will come because of this. We think there's a lot of interest in the R&D, flex manufacturing, the high tech piece of the industrial space is kind of what we're targeting. Right? That's our objective. It's not to put in something that is going to make everybody tremendously unhappy. And we're going to come back with a site plan approval where you guys
Yeah,
would
and
get to see all of these.
I think we gotta remember some of that. We're kinda toting the line right now of talking about site plans and talking about.
Yeah.
So let's just keep that in the
And
back of our head.
doesn't that section of land, doesn't that have a large wet area down there?
It does. A
So
sign-
wouldn't it naturally go towards the open area and be a nice buffer for the abutters?
Yeah.
there's a lot of wet in the southern portion of that property. And Ann, just to your question too about the housing, just so you're aware, as I said, the 80 plus acres to the north is still under the control of Pillsbury.
What do you mean, what are you?
North of Old Rum Trail. So Trammell
Oh,
Crow.
you mean on that property?
Correct.
Yeah.
So Trammell Crow is looking at developing the 113 acres to the south of Old Rum Trail. Pillsbury is still planning to develop the 80 plus acres to the north. We are targeting housing up in that area. It's a great spot for it because it's right off the interstate and it all goes to Derry. So it's a great spot for housing and it can still happen up in that area.
But it should have enough of a buffer from the folks who live along Ash Street to not create a nightmare for them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We totally understand that.
And I don't,
We're
I don't
trying to
think, yeah,
consolidate.
I don't think any of us disagree with that, Ann, but that's more of a,
I know,
that's a
but,
conversation to be had at the site plan level, not so much at the zoning level.
but we're talking about rezoning an AR1
No, I
area
understand,
too.
I understand. Mr. D.
So, I'm very confident in the ability of this board to flesh out and listen to the consumers, who are the abutters. Because, just to be perfectly clear, nothing can be built on any site in the town of Londonderry without first going through the process, one of which is this board, among others, before a shovel can be turned. I'm reminded of a case that happened in an adjoining community, I won't name it, about an asphalt plant that was going to be built in the middle of a residential neighborhood. It was allowed because of the zoning. No one thought anyone would ever broach the subject. The company did. They came in, they went through the process, and as far as the abutters are concerned, the process worked because that asphalt plant is not going to be built in the middle of the city on that land, even though it can, even though it is allowed. And so I have confidence that, back to rock crushing, that this board can handle that type of a thing and will do the right thing for the community and, more importantly, the direct abutters.
And I feel as though the applicant probably understands that. Is that fair to say?
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask one more
Yeah,
question?
okay.
I believe that's one of the highest elevations in Londonderry, on the center, around the center of this property. Is that true? It's almost 500 feet.
No, Parish Hills is the highest spot in town.
Right, I know, but this is close, because they have an antenna up there, and,
Yeah, there's a couple cell phone towers.
pardon?
There's a couple cell phone towers.
Your cell
located
phone
on the
towers
property.
there, yeah.
Let's do another ski area then.
There you go.
Worked at Parish Hills for a while.
No, I didn't know if you're gonna do, I mean,
2
we've
days of
seen
snow
where
again.
they, in another part of town where there basically feels like it's a gravel operation. They're taking down the hills of that property. Are you planning on doing massive leveling on that property? Or, because it's, there's a lot of granite underneath that, so,
Site plan.
Yeah.
so I just hope,
Again, Ann, that's really more on, I understand. but
I know,
it's more on the site plan level.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It-
you were
it
talking
doesn't-
about rock crushing.
I know,
rock
and that's why I'm saying, I get it.
crushing
I get it.
operation, yeah.
Anything else from the board?
I'd just like to say, I know you're not gonna do right.
Yeah.
I was using it for effect, as an example, as an extreme example, to get people's attention.
Sure.
I know you're not doing rock crushing there, so don't think that I'm insinuating you are, so.
Anything else from the board? All right, this is a public hearing, so I'm gonna open it up to the public. Anybody from the public? Evening, sir. If you could state your name and address.
Ray Burslin, 3 Gary Drive. And so, here we go. We're looking at this project, or it's not even a project. It's just looking at a piece of property. And could I just ask whether this property has been sold, or is it still owned by Woodmont?
The property is owned by Pillsbury Realty. It's under agreement.
Okay, so the answer is no. Okay. Okay. Now, I don't want to get into site plan, but I think it would be kind of nice to know what the plan is to put on this property, because it's kind of the top of a mountain there. It is like 503 feet high. There's 2 cell phone towers on it, and pretty much there is wetland, vernal pools, and an awful lot of ledge. And as far as Woodmont goes, I mean, Woodmont has a 20-year project across the road, which we're 10 years into, and there's a lot that's got to be done there. So, and on top of that, we have these other projects that we're looking at also. It's fine when we think about bringing jobs in, bringing good businesses in, and I'm certainly not against that. But we're looking at opening up exit 4A, which really is not going to be opened up because it's got no place to go. However, it certainly could be benefit to this, because this would give them access to start whatever they intending to do. There's an awful lot that we're dealing with in this town, including what runs off of a very high hill and where that's going and what it's going to impact the rest of town. So I hope everybody looks at this very closely and knows what's going to happen here. Whatever you're going to build on it, I mean, there's perhaps there's not going to be rock crushing, but there's certainly going to be land clearing. And I mean, I've walked up there years ago, and there's bedrock right at the surface. So a little difficult to build anything right on top of rock that is sticking out of the ground unless you level it. So there's going to a lot of be site work that has to be done there. So I just hope everybody looks at this very closely and realizes what the impact on Londonderry is going to be, not to mention surrounding town. So I think there is impact to Derry too. So a lot to look at, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Ray. Anything else from the public? Seeing none, I will close public comment. All right, any additional board input?
I think the part of the thing to think about here is that this, regardless of whether this parcel is rezoned or not, this one piece of the pie, the land is gonna be developed. The fact that it's a hill and the fact that somebody's gonna have to do whatever they gotta do to make it buildable is gonna happen whether this is rezoned or not. It's not gonna, not rezoning this land is of no benefit to the abutters if they're thinking, great, now they can't take the hill down. Because,
Yeah, that's not-
because they can. It's not, and I don't want anybody to have any false pretenses, either in the room or watching on TV, that if this doesn't get rezoned, that nothing's gonna happen there. Because stuff's gonna happen there anyway. The rock's gonna go wherever it's gotta go, however it's gotta get there, because it's allowed. So, I just wanna get that on the table so that people are very clear that this land is gonna be developed, one way or the other. The other thing to think too is that it's, if, I apologize, I was chuckling to myself a little bit because I had a voice in my head that had all the voices that had been bombarding this board and other boards in town saying, well, how come nothing's going in anywhere? How come Woodmont's not built out? How come there's not, well, there's a chance to build it out. Here's a chance for the revenue that we were promised. Whether or not we want to rezone this or not is a subject that we're going to take up in a few minutes, but thank you for entertaining.
Thank you. Anything else from the board? All right, seeing none, I'm looking for a recommendation.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I will move that we recommend the town council the approval of rezoning, request to rezone 42 Ash Street, tax map 10, lot 45, from AR1, Agricultural Residential 1, at Woodmont Commons PUD, to Industrial 1. Pillsbury Realty Development LLC is the owner. TC Boston Development Incorporated is the applicant.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second that, Mr. Chair.
I have a second from Lynn. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Aye. Nay. Nay or aye.
Yeah, whatever, yeah.
All means the same.
And the chair votes in the affirmative.
And I'm abstaining.
You're
just
abstaining
'cause
for
it's gonna come
council?
for the
Yeah.
council.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ayes and 2 nays and 1 abstention. So the motion passes.
Thank you very much.
gentlemen.
Thanks.
So this will go to the town
Town
council. The town council will have 2 readings on it. First reading is to introduce it. Second reading is a public hearing. So the town council will have a public hearing.
So, question, point of order, Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
So for the nay votes, do we have to record the reason for the nay votes?
I think there is.
Do we have to record the reason for the nay votes,
That's good.
Mike?
I do think we actually, I think we have to.
I think it would probably make sense.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if we could,
It's a, well, fairly recent statute that requires it, so.
I mean, the board as a whole did not vote no, but it would be good to have the reasoning on the record.
okay. So Ann, Jason, if you could provide a reason for your no, for a record.
I personally don't agree with the idea of expanding that level of development options so close to houses.
Thank you, sir. Ann?
I think the same way. And I was concerned about that exit right around that Ash Street area.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ann.
About the size of the trucks or whatever
Yep.
would be leaving and anyways.
Thank you. All right, so we have a public hearing on an application for formal review of a site plan for infrastructure associated with the Village on Technology Hill PUD, including roadways, water, sewer, electric, and gas utility services. Zoned Industrial 1, Industrial 2, and the Village on Technology Hill PUD. Londonderry Holdings LLC is the owner and applicant. Map 28, lots 31-6, 29-2, and map 17, lots 2, 5-3, 5-4, and 5-5. This was continued from the June 26, 2024 meeting. All right. Gentlemen.
All right, good evening. My name is Nick Golan. I'm a licensed engineer and principal with the firm TF Moran. To my right is Mr. Bruce Blazon, general manager with North Branch Construction. North Branch will be our construction manager for this project. Given we had a few comments in regards to how this would be built, we thought it would be appropriate for him to accompany me this evening and also provide me just a little company as we chat. Before we get into our presentation, I want to express my apologies, but also my thanks to both the staff and the board. Our resubmittal was provided a little later than expected, and we're extremely thankful that staff was able to make up our lack of timing so that we could be here tonight, and we appreciate the board taking the opportunity to hear us, so thank you.
Thank you.
Relative to what we have before you, I'm not sure if there's anything you are looking for specifically from staff before we jump into the overall application, that being for infrastructure for the Village on Technology Hill. But my expectation is we'd essentially follow the memorandum as our agenda, if that would be agreeable to the board.
Sure.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mike, for the timeline and background. I think it's very well put as to what we have done to get here today. From the initial stages of the PUD, trying to envision what this would actually look like, fast forwarding through evaluation of the infrastructure, which is really what brings us here tonight. Now, relative to how that infrastructure is defined, this project was broken up into ideally bite-sized pieces, so that way it could, one, be reviewed, and also the board would have the opportunity to provide their review beyond the technical review of those items. So what we're looking at tonight, this is really the site preparation. This is our roadway infrastructure, our utilities, and our stormwater management. Noted within the staff memorandum, talks a little bit about the need for flexibility. We have to figure out which parts go with which. Our proposal for this evening is that the infrastructure does not include the off-site improvements, nor would it include the traffic elements. We will be back before you to discuss those. So we would appreciate that opportunity and that flexibility relative to the elements of the project. Relative to staff comments, if I can, this was probably one of the biggest topics we talked about last time was stormwater management. You know, what are we proposing? Is it ready for prime time? Have we made the necessary revisions so that we have the opportunity to move forward? One of the concerns that's listed within the staff report is whether or not the basins, the stormwater management areas that we've defined, are these big enough? Are they large enough not only for this phase of the development and the eventual phases of the development? These basins have been sized relative to this application for infrastructure. That's what we're asking for approval tonight. Now, have they been oversized to also accommodate future elements of the project? They have, but we're not looking for approval of those future elements tonight. We're asking solely for the approval of the infrastructure phase. The reality is other additional upstream stormwater management areas, as can be seen in some of the plans that we've submitted, will be provided to make sure that we can offset any of those increases in impervious. I'd note that the footprints of these basins, that being really their width, their length, those are somewhat cast in stone from the perspective of they've been sized as large as we felt appropriate for the surrounding area. So this isn't a case of we'll be back for retail, childcare, residential, or the Envision building saying, gonna have to resize that basin, gonna have to start over. That's not our intent here. Is there potential to modify the outlet structure as far as the orifices so that we can better meter the flow? Certainly, but that would be expected as part of a phase development. So that's what we're asking for from the board. We're asking for your approval of the infrastructure relative to the stormwater management, so the pavement that is our roads and sidewalks, acknowledging that we'll be adding buildings in the future, we'll be adding additional sidewalks in the future, but we'll also probably be adding some additional upstream stormwater management areas to provide the appropriate attenuation. So relative to the staff comments that we have, we agree wholeheartedly that the expectation is if we were to come back and show that, well, the stormwater management areas that we have developed are substandard, they won't be approved. We'll have to rectify that. So I just wanted to make sure that I was clear at the onset that that was our expectation, that we're asking for the board for the approval of infrastructure. We do appreciate the look-aheads, and I think that was one of the themes that we noticed in some of the staff comments, is that we are looking towards some of those future phases of the development to make sure this has been thought out. And we've done that in part with the PUD that defined that framework. And then as we bring each site plan forward, the board will then have the opportunity to review those elements and make sure they're consistent not only with the regulations, but also with the PUD master plan. So that's our hope in regards to the stormwater management areas and really just the project in general. As we go to the next item within the staff comments, there's some discussion of the bridge crossing and the potential of an additional non-residential connection to Akira Way. There's some other comments in regards to the bridge, and I'm going to have Bruce help me with that one momentarily. But in the meantime, this bridge is purposeful, and it's purposeful in its location. It allows us to minimize our environmental impacts. It allows us to provide a wildlife passage along the northerly portion of the site, and it allows us to minimize the infinitesimal amount of wetlands that we are impacting as part of this project. The alternate, which is suggested, which is somewhat discussed in both B and C, which is a ladder connection to Akira Way, although possible, would generate additional wetland impacts. It also expands the footprint of the project into an area that's currently unknown. We have a future manufacturing area that's really one of the few elements of this project that's not fully vested. To try and design our primary throughway in that area where we have no true use that is 100% defined, we wouldn't find to be practical. We'd also say that it's inconsistent with the PUD. The PUD defined where our access points would be. The PUD also defined how we would evaluate our traffic. And again, that would be a component that would be inconsistent with those previously approved documents. So though while we appreciate the comment, it goes further, and this is probably the important part where we really discuss about, well, if you're not going to use this access, well, what else are you going to do to confirm that your truck traffic is appropriate? The intent is from Kitty Hawk Landing. That's what's defined in our site plans. It's what's defined within our traffic study. So that is our element that we'll be using for the heavy truck traffic route, is be coming off of Kitty Hawk Landing. It'll be appropriately signed as those phases of the development progress, that being our industrial uses. So we have every confidence that that is the appropriate solution to that quandary. Specific to that element as the bridge as well, it's noted that the bridge plans have been provided, but there hasn't been the opportunity for them to be reviewed and approved. We just ask that the board look at that as a potential condition of approval. It is a licensed bridge designer who has done this work. Who is that individual, if you wouldn't mind?
So North Branch took the mantle of bridge design, not as a contract, but as a design element as well, with GM2, professional engineer Tom Levins, formerly of the state of New Hampshire, well respected in the state.
Thank you, sir. So we have every expectation that he has done his job well, and that'll be a speedy review and approval. So if the board would be willing to consider that as a condition of approval, acknowledging that it hasn't been reviewed yet, we would appreciate that opportunity. Going through the next couple of items that are listed within the staff report, that being items D, E, F, and then G. Again, we see a very similar theme in that we're forecasting ahead to what those future elements of the project will be. I think the probably easiest answer to the majority of these questions are that they are defined in the future phases of the project. Specific to the internal sidewalk system, we see an expansion of that as we go through each phase. We realize some of this will be organic as we define how movement throughout the development will be defined, but that otherwise the subsequent phases of the project do define how that internal sidewalk system would be used. And it is aptly pointed out that it would be recognized that there's some discretion entailed in assigning an improvement to the infrastructure review or later as a site plan review. So we'd ask you to be mindful of that those future site plans are going to better address those elements. Bicycle infrastructure as well as rail trail. So we have an ongoing dialogue with Bob Rimmel of Londonderry Trailways to come about what the appropriate improvements are so that we can make that connection. We're not looking to reinvent the wheel. We realize they have been working very hard to best define bike paths and that rail trail system. So our expectation is that our project will be able to commit funds to help them achieve their goals. So relative to that element, although it is a future phase, I feel confident in being able to say that we're going to have the opportunity to sit down with them and come up with the appropriate solution, because they've already been working hard at this. We don't need to reinvent what they've already done, but we can certainly provide some financial contribution to help them towards their goals, which ultimately be a betterment to the project as well as the overall community. The last item that was listed is in regards to the childcare roadway and parking configuration. And though I don't specifically agree with the evaluation, I would note this is a future phase. So how that pickup and drop-off area is managed would be addressed as part of the retail and childcare phase. And we hope to be back before you with that element very soon. Within the overall memorandum, there's also noted the need for waivers, one of which is in regards to the cleansing velocity for pipes. It was noted that a little bit more information as to where that is happening would be appreciated. Within our 25-year pipe summary that was submitted as part of our stormwater management report, the velocities of all those pipes are listed. We did update that submittal, having received this staff report today, as far as which areas those are. There's a total of 7 locations. All of these are catch basins that are basically the front end of any pipe network. They're receiving very little flow. They are run at modest slopes that are appropriate, but it's a function of the mathematics. The flow is equal to the velocity times the area. If I have a very small area draining to it, and I have to use a 15-inch pipe, which is the minimum requirement, I can't achieve that 2 feet per second. We evaluated iterations as far as different slopes or otherwise that could possibly provide a benefit. There was not one. What we do see during the future elements is that, well, what happens? We're building out more, so we have more flow going to those catch basins. By enhancing the amount that drains to it, that's enhancing our flow. So if our Q goes up, that means our V goes up, so the velocity will be able to increase. So in subsequent elements of the project, we will see that there will be fewer of these required because there's going to be more area draining to those locations. The other waiver that you received, and this may not be required, but Boy Scout at heart, so belt and suspenders. In lieu of a utility clearance letter, we have a memorandum of understanding that's been submitted between Manchester Waterworks and the applicant, where they have spelled out how they are going to go about providing water service to this project. Again, this is an off-site improvement that will essentially serve our uses. We realize that we are providing our utility infrastructure as part of this phase, but that means locations and confirming that the elements of the design are appropriate. The final element that is to make sure that the appropriate flow is provided would be in that enhancement and the off-site improvement. So in that memorandum of understanding, it outlines essentially what are the steps that we're going to take to make sure this is going to work appropriately. The first of which was to evaluate the existing pump house and existing pumps. Is it good enough? I kind of knew it already, but unfortunately the existing pumps were inadequate. We essentially had a false reading when we did our pump test, and that the fire pump kicked on. Looked like we had great results. Unfortunately, we didn't. So we've had our MEP, Fitzmyer and Tachi, evaluate the pumps within that structure, evaluate the spatial constraints within that structure, and they've currently provided a design intent letter to Manchester Waterworks for the review on how we're going to retrofit that existing building. In short, it involves taking the generator that is interior to the building and relocating it outside, such that it'll provide space so that additional pumps of a larger variety may be installed while the existing pumps continue to operate, and then the opportunity to switch those pumps over to the larger pumps. Seems like it's a good system. There'll also be some electrical improvements that are required. That design is ongoing. That is another item that the board may consider as a condition of approval if you feel that needs to be acted on as part of this application. Our expectation is those final design plans would be provided in the next 2 months, possibly sooner, to have that reviewed and approved by Manchester Waterworks.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, Nick.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned reconfiguration of that pump house, for lack of a better term. Will that come to this board because it's a change?
The building itself will not change. As currently constituted, they've measured the spatial dimensions to show that they can do everything interior of the building. The only element that would be removed would
Except
be,
the generator.
would be the generator. So if the board feels that that's necessary, we can certainly come back, show you what that looks like.
Well, so as-
Otherwise, it would be
Yeah,
the
yeah,
staff to
so as
review.
far as I'm concerned, and I'm a nobody, but as far as I'm concerned, that's a change.
Okay.
A generator makes noise.
Mhm.
And
So
it looks like
again,
John wants to say something. here.
Similar to any municipality, Tony, what they can do is again, come in with, offering to present the plan to us for informational purposes.
Great,
We'd
thank
be
you.
happy to do that.
Thank you very much.
Nick, keep going.
Yes, sir. All right, sorry, I'll keep it moving. You know, I'm going to try and keep it relatively short and sweet. I know you've seen our faces for a long time in front of this board relative to this project. There may be just an item or two that we wanted to make light of, and in part that's why Bruce was here. One of the comments that we received as part of the third-party review continues to ask us to show our wetland impacts for our bridge crossing. Bruce, would you mind elaborating on your conversation with our potential builders and their thoughts on that element?
So again, as the entity is the bridge designer as well as ultimately the construction manager for the construction, we have that bridge design and that bridge impact at heart. We're negotiating with several site contractors for this project, but in specific, 2 bridge contractors. And those bridge contractors will be awarded based on the best plan, not necessarily the best price, but as long as they can meet those conditions to not impact the wetland. And we'll be diligent with that. We'll bring our plans to staff, and we'll have the conversations further.
Thank you.
All right. The other element that came out of the review comments that I thought would make sense to discuss is there's some discussion about showing the future impervious areas as part of this phase. The whole intent with breaking this into these pieces was so that the board would have the opportunity to evaluate each phase as it's being presented. As engineers, we've evaluated this for the future to make sure that we have seamless integration of those future phases. But what we're asking for approval tonight is in regards to the infrastructure phase. Relative to concerns that the basins are sized adequately, we understand what your rules and requirements are, and that all those future phases will have to also meet those requirements. So that it doesn't become a item of contention as part of the design review, we did want to confirm with the board this evening that the crux of that review is for this infrastructure phase, not for future elements and future impervious areas.
So, Mr. Chair, thank you. So, Nick, I want to keep going on that thought. So you currently have, let's just, for the sake of clarity, you have a pipe, and you have a pipe designed. And in your mind, and in your engineering expertise,
Yes, sir.
the pipe is the right size right now, in your opinion, for the entire site to be built out.
Yes, sir. And I'll clarify that with the elements that are draining to the stormwater practices that we are currently proposing.
Correct. Now we're gonna go one step further because you're gonna have phase A, phase B, step 1, step 2, whatever. Every time you put a shovel in the ground to start a new building, you're gonna have to come back, or at least our engineering, John, is gonna have to look at those plans again to double check to make sure that your engineering, which you did 6 months ago, whatever, is correct.
That's correct.
And when another building, so every subsequent building that you build that has a roof on it, that's gonna have watershed on it, is gonna have to still meet the requirement of that pipe that you designed however many months ago. And you're saying the pipe is correct, and you're not concerned about the subsequent phases?
It sounds like a tall task, but part of my reassurance is that we've divided the site into sectors, such that certain sectors will drain to certain areas. Part of that is the tributaries, as far as how does the site drain now, trying to match those so that we aren't creating increases in runoff to our abutters. which we've achieved relative to the evaluation that's provided. As we move forward into the industrial areas of development, those drain to a different portion of the site. They're not going to drain to these basins. If anything, we're more likely to, the residential, we're adding impervious. We're adding the buildings to the grassed areas. Retail childcare, just to take a quick segue, has its own individualized drainage system that does not contribute to these systems.
Yeah, so, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we have other things tonight too. So my point is, let's say you get to the final phase of build-out, and you come back in, and that pipe, that single pipe that we're talking about for the sake of an illustration, doesn't meet the requirements. You're digging that thing up and putting in a bigger one.
And my client won't be happy with me. So that onus is on us as the engineers.
So
and I respect that.
that's my point of the illustration that I laid out with all the different phases. If in fact, we get to the final phase, call it Z, because you're out of letters, and it doesn't meet or whatever, the math doesn't work anymore, you're digging all that piping up and putting in a bigger one.
Understood.
John, am I close?
You're close, Tony, but you're concentrating on the pipes. Our concern is the detention ponds themselves.
Okay.
But it could equally be the pipes. I mean, any aspect of the infrastructure.
In reality, if the detention pond's the wrong size at Phase Z, they're gonna build a bigger detention pond, no?
Or not build Phase Z.
Or they can't
Correct.
build any
Yeah.
further.
Correct.
Right,
Yeah.
so that's my point is, there's still gonna be checks and balances as we go through this phasing thing with this particular development to make that it's gonna make sure that the math works and that things are happening correctly. If not, it's gonna have to be rectified before the next thing can be built.
Correct, but even at this stage though, Tony, again, for the 50-year storm, the analysis wasn't presented to us for the infrastructure portion that Nick continues to talk about. So personally, from my professional opinion, I am not convinced that the ponds themselves right now are sized for the 50-year storm.
For just the
record.
infrastructure alone.
Exactly,
Why?
because we don't have the 50-year analysis. Wasn't submitted to us.
Nick?
Those 50-year results can be shown in the alteration of terrain best management worksheets. And I didn't lead with this, but I think it's important to note since we're talking about stormwater. The alteration of terrain permit for the infrastructure phase was approved today. That includes that 50-year data that Mr. Troutier has just represented, was reviewed and approved by the state. So I look forward to the challenge of making sure that we appease Mr. Troutier with all elements of our project. He can be a tough one, but he's consistent. So we know what's laid out for us. So we need to make sure that our project meets his expectations and the expectations of your regulations.
So I'm comfortable laying it out that way. I'm comfortable that the checks and balances are there. And I think, John, if they're wrong, it's gonna cost them a lot of money.
Oh, no doubt.
And if they're convinced that they're right, have at it.
The only problem though is that it's the downgrading of butters that you need to be wary of.
Can I?
Or isn't that what your job is, to
Yep,
protect the abutters?
I understand.
Mr. Chair, can I take this from the top, in sort of a logic?
Yeah.
So I think that what I'd like to point out is that, this is our second PUD that we have experience with here in Londonderry. And it differs from Woodmont Commons in that the infrastructure is being constructed all at once up front. For the most part, Woodmont, the infrastructure associated with the Woodmont projects has been addressed as those projects have come in. So we are talking about something that is a significant undertaking in terms of scale, in terms of time frame, and that brings with it a whole set of challenges. And I think that what you see in the memo and what you heard from the applicant is a lot about how a project like this that is inherently complex and is so large, how is it going to be reviewed and approved? because, and Tony put his finger right on it. We're approving the infrastructure upfront based on what we're projecting, but when you get into it, it often differs. And so I think that comment was really well taken. But we need to keep that in mind as we work through review of this project. Now, just as a historical matter, there were 4 checklist items that were waived for acceptance purposes only last time. The board granted a waiver and then continued the application to tonight to allow for future consideration. We have a comment in here that I think recognizes what Tony asked about and what I heard Mr. Golan acknowledge, which is that as future site plans are reviewed and approved, if it needs to be expressly understood that the town, in its reasonable discretion, has to retain the right to require changes to this existing infrastructure system that are triggered by future site development. And I don't think that there's any dispute about that. There is a waiver request. We've provided you with the standard to review that. We have made a number of comments throughout that Mr. Golan alluded to. And again, echoing something that was discussed a minute ago, staff recommends it be made clear that future phases of this project will not be approved if the stormwater flows associated therewith are found to overwhelm the approved detention basins. So it's in the applicant's business interests to make sure that this is designed correctly. No guarantee for sure, but I think everybody understands that the board retains jurisdiction to address that as these projects come in. One thing I did want to respond to that was discussed at length, at some length, the last meeting, and that was, once a infrastructure, a stormwater management system is approved, well, the cat's out of the bag, and then, if it's wrong, there's not a whole lot that can be done. I don't think that's the case. There are the civil remedies that were discussed between landowners at the last hearing, but there's also RSA 676-4A, which gives the board the authority to revoke a site plan that doesn't conform to the specifications or to the design that was reviewed and approved. One of the specifications is that it produce no more runoff off the site than is currently being produced. And so I would submit that the board is not powerless to address that kind of a scenario. On the bridge crossing, I think that the board certainly could condition approval tonight on satisfactory review and approval by engineering of a bridge plan, but this is not, frankly, something that we see every day. And I think that certainly we want to be sure that we're certain that the bridge is structurally sound, that the unique characteristics inherent in a timber bridge are considered. John has enough concerns as a preliminary matter that I think tonight could easily devolve into a back and forth debate about wooden bridges. And so while I fully expect John to voice those concerns in a minute, I also suggest that this is not really where the action is at. This is not really where the rubber meets the road tonight. And certainly they don't need that bridge approved in order to get started on site work, I don't believe. Continuing, Mr. Chair, just to address a couple of these comments. Point taken on C, D, E, and F, as far as there is some discretion here that is needed in assigning certain elements to the infrastructure review and approval or to later site plan reviews and approvals. We operate from if we have identified a concern, let's get it on the table now so that the applicant has as much notice as possible. But I don't disagree that a lot of these items can reasonably be addressed at a later stage. I think the one that really straddles the line between infrastructure review and approval and site plan review and approval, is the legitimate concern that was raised by the regional planner about truck traffic, deconflicting truck and industrial traffic from the other uses. And so, the closing paragraph of that comment is that if there is no appetite to evaluate the alternative access point, then staff would recommend that the board condition approval on a satisfactory demonstration that the proposed road network poses no health or safety risks, nuisance risks, for example, by appropriate signage or other traffic control measures. So I don't think that there's a disagreement about how some of these elements should be reviewed and approved. It just needs to be put in this bucket or that bucket. And the same goes for the child care comments. And so at the end of the day, Mr. Chairman, the staff recommendation is as follows, that provided the board is persuaded that the stormwater management basins are appropriately sized, then staff would recommend that the board conditionally approve this application. But it really comes down to whether staff is persuaded, and that goes back to the question that we were discussing initially, which is what is the stormwater being designed for here? What is the applicant asking for approval to do? And so I think it's important to keep that in mind as we work through this.
Thank you. Board members? Anything?
I have a couple of questions on stormwater. So the detention ponds are all being designed around the 50-year storm. That's the engineering criteria.
Required.
So I'm assuming, or any idea where the storms up north last week and the week before, where they would be in terms of a 50-year storm or a 100-year storm?
Personally, I do not know when.
Because I guess my question really ends up being, if we experience a 100-year storm 5 years after this development is finished, who owns the liability for the damage that, if there's a potential damage issued, from the stormwater runoff? Who owns the liability for it? Is it the town? Is it the development?
Question for an attorney.
We've seen the evidence up north, right? And
If only we knew one.
I'm sure some of that's going to be litigated for a few years.
Yeah.
so we don't have an answer. So, and I'm not looking, so if that's the answer, we don't have an answer,
Well,
but
I think that
I'm just concerned about the types of storms we're seeing more and more frequently now.
I agree, and I think that
Before you go on
I'm
that
sorry, Mr. Chair.
question, would that be, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't disagree, but our regulation is a 50-year, right? So
Correct.
I totally agree with what you're saying,
Mhm.
but that would look into a regulatory change of a requirement of a 100-year storm. Am I correct on that?
Yep.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Perfect.
And you have somebody who's stamping the design, who is in between us and the liability.
Yes.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't have a real issue with your design. I assume it's going to meet all the engineering standards, right? So let me say that. But I'm just concerned with the amount and the frequency of storms that we're seeing now and how much damage is done by these severe rainstorms, so. yeah,
Before I get you, Mr. D, I never let our town engineer speak.
Yeah.
Mr. Trotter, do you have anything to say?
Regarding the bridge, I'm not aware of, our regulations require things to be built to state standards, New Hampshire Department of Transportation standards. I am not aware of any standard for a timber bridge. I know that a wooden guardrail would not match standards. So I'm very concerned with the guardrail, the wooden curbing, who's gonna look at that? And who's gonna somebody will put a stamp to it, anybody will put a stamp to it. I have a bad word for that.
Well, I don't have a
particular
stamp,
person.
so
Exactly, and I wouldn't put my stamp to it. I'm not a structural engineer. But again, so at what point, who's gonna really look at that? And again, anybody can stamp something. So, there are no standards in with a typical bridge, the state does regular inspections on those bridges. On a municipally owned bridge, they do the inspection, they give us the inspection report, they give us something that we need to fix.
and we're on the hook to fix it. With a private bridge, they don't do those type of inspections. So, there's
So
some,
don't, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Don't we, so don't we make a developer like this check their internal stormwater things?
stormwater, but I'm talking the bridge, Tony.
Right, so, but in a Londonderry regulation, we make them do that, we make them, if they have, catch basins underneath a building, they have to fill
And
out
they're-
a form and
Correct.
send it into you
Yep.
and every.
That's-
So
that's-
why couldn't we do that for a wooden bridge and make them inspect it every year?
Well, I think that's
Or every
why.
5 years.
That's why, as Mike is saying, our memo says, let's take this, remove that, don't conditionally approve that portion of it at this stage.
So they'd have to come back then, when they're
Well,
thinking
let's
about
look
whatever the
at this.
bridge is,
Let's-
whatever the
let's-
bridge is gonna be.
Let's
Right,
think about this, and we're gonna have to have some further dialogue with,
Yeah, I mean, the point
With the
is that they're coming back anyway.
Yeah.
Soon they're coming back on traffic.
Yeah.
This could easily be attached to
Yep.
something else while these other conditions of approval are cleared, should the board take that action tonight.
One more.
I just think that we're, and that's really the point of the staff comment, which is, I don't think, not having the structural review in hand, I think it's pointless to have a debate about the merits of a wooden bridge tonight.
I don't disagree.
Yeah.
I don't disagree at all. Point of clarification.
Sure.
So this bridge is not wooden. This bridge is concrete abutment, structural steel. It has a wooden deck underneath the road surface only, and it has a wooden guardrail that we originally had designed as structural steel guardrail. We used the wooden effect to soften the look for the residential community. This is absolutely a structural steel bridge designed to the New Hampshire DOT standards by a licensed professional bridge engineer in the state of New Hampshire.
with a wooden deck, though.
Wooden,
Yeah, so again, for an
it's
engineer.
the substrate that holds that roadway up.
Correct.
You know, it's
So-
a well-proven,
So we'll see that next time.
yeah.
But I did have one other thing. Everybody, we're talking about downstream, downhill, down whatever. I'm looking at the map right now, and I'm wondering, other than, I'm looking at Harvey Road right now, and I'm looking at the airport runway, which you flood out a runway, that's probably gonna be a big problem. But other than that, who's getting flooded?
Just last summer, when they were doing some exploration out there, there was a beaver dam that was dismantled, and it washed out somebody's driveway.
There's houses there?
Yes.
Yeah. On Grenier Field.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anything else from the board? Sylvia, I keep forgetting about you because I'm so used to people just being over there.
That's okay. I do have a question for the
Sure.
applicant. I know there's a difference of opinion on that third access point.
Oh, I see.
So let's say, as you're building this out and you have your two access points, you're not gonna really have any, oversight of the freight that goes in and out of here. You'll have your signs, they'll maybe have an idea of where they're going, but there's no way that we have control that freight won't exit the site to Akira Way. And so, one question is, is that bridge able to hold freight loaded up? So I'm seeing nodding, that's good, just wanted to.
Absolutely.
So let the minutes show that, yes, thumbs up on that, so all emergency vehicles, all heavy freight will be able to go over that bridge. Number two.
Can we just clarify something, though?
Sure.
Nick said earlier, all truck traffic is going up Kitty Hawk.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is, he can't control that. He's not gonna be there with his stop sign, go the other way every day, right?
I
don't
can
think-
attest to no, I will not be the one out there. But we have a very diligent owner who's been very successful both in this town and elsewhere in crafting an appropriate business and that those employees follow those rules. So the expectation is that, yes, Kitty Hawk will be our truck traffic route, and that's why it's defined as such within our applications.
Thank you. So that's really good to know. Number two, typically, and this might be addressed later on, that's one of the issues, I think, which is tricky here, because you've approved the master plan, which to me is conceptual, so you have the uses approved. There's some concepts there that you've approved. So now this is our first site plan, if you will, but it's an infrastructure plan, and it hints towards some of the site build-out. Will the board have the ability to review some of the road system later on? For example, let's say the board asks for a truck, usually you get to see how the trucks navigate and you make sure that they can do the certain turns. Because there's some, sharper turns here and there on this site. Will the board at a future date be able to see that truck circulation to verify that the easiest way in and out of this site will indeed be to the south?
I will counter that with yes, and they can see it now. It is within the current design package to define how those turning movements would work. Although we design all of the roadway infrastructure to accommodate that type of traffic, the easiest access is from Kitty Hawk Landing, as those uses are all located in either the southerly or easterly quadrants of the site. It wouldn't behoove a driver to access from Akira Way in that respect. But understood as to the question, and it's always important to make sure we check those boxes.
Thank you. One more, or I have a couple more. Another question. I know your master plan, many of the drawings show bicyclists, walkers, that kind of thing. And I understand that part of the next phases will show those connections more. We do get an idea of some of that sidewalk now, that sidewalk system. But is it true that the idea here is that the residents will be encouraged to walk or bike to probably a future job at maybe a manufacturing or office or on-site?
Yes, so one of the things, Mr. Chairman, you'll see in subsequent applications, should we have the opportunity to bring those forward, both in the retail childcare as well as the residential, is you'll see an abundance of bike racks provided at appropriate locations. Relative to that bicycle infrastructure, we're trying to work with the right folks to make sure what we design is appropriate. So that, in our mind, is Londonderry Trailways, and making sure Bob Remmel and his group can help direct us. So it's not identified here, but we have the ability, should we be desirous to expand the width of sidewalks for that purpose or otherwise, there is that opportunity. There are other elements of the project where we see being as more natural walking trails as interconnection points. Some of those things will be organic. I know we've made the mistake in the past of trying to tell people, all right, this is where you're going to walk. Those things are somewhat defined in time after a development is open and operational. And again, gives the applicant the opportunity to improve upon those areas. That would be our expectation. But to your point, no, this is very much a walkable community. And that is one of the things that we have spoken at as being a paramount element of the project.
Right, and if I expand upon that this village concept really is, the manufacturing jobs are the client's prime business. He's developing all of these features to attract a workforce that can live, work, play in that same community. He's talked about para-courses and, bicycle trails all through his property. That's why there was this property develops only 60 acres of 107, I believe. 110. That nature will be everywhere. The civil engineer's done a magnificent job at keeping wetlands disturbance to under 1,000 feet on 110 acres. That is the intent of the client, is to keep nature as part of this development. And I'd just like to add to the future concern about stormwater runoff, and if Nick did a decent job about designing his infrastructure package. Nick has designed other elements of this project already, and those packages have been submitted. So the client's desire is to build out all of the infrastructure, but all of the design that will verify Nick's work is either before the engineering staff or is shortly coming. This isn't a project like Woodmont where you don't know what will happen from 10 years from now. This project is to be built out in a continuous fashion. Thank you.
One last question, and this is really to solve a mystery for me, and it may be because I've not heard more in the past about this, but I know that the applicant has put up a good reason why you should use ITE specifications for parking and the number of parking spots. And we've heard you now tonight again talk about, encouraging pedestrians to walk, residents to walk or bike to their spots. I'm curious why, even though you've, wanted the ITE number of parking spaces, which is fewer than the Londonderry required parking, why you have 3 times the amount required of parking spaces on the site, and are you seeing some uses that are going to have some amazing kind of people coming from off-site on here? Because I was just really curious, because it's almost over 1,000 parking spaces. It's between 900 and 1,000 spaces more than required.
Mr. Chairman, do you want us to speak to parking this evening?
Yeah, you can briefly answer.
Sure.
Please.
I think one of the easiest answer is it's always easy to make it smaller than trying to make it bigger later. So the parking as defined envisions what the applicant has dealt with at his previous development sites, where they had over 1,200 employees. So it will accommodate that element for those industrial portions of the site. Now, the reality is when we get to those areas of the development, I think what you'll be seeing is a phased option for that parking, such that we can minimize the amount of pavement that's necessary for those parking spaces, but to show how it can be built in the future if so necessary. When they first opened that building at 111,000 some odd square feet, are they going to need that many parking spaces? Or are they only going to need that many parking spaces when they do their next expansion, which is defined within the PUD? Chances are they're only going to need that parking once it gets that much bigger. So we'll systematically develop this such that we can show phase parking for those elements. So we'll have the opportunity to have those checks and balances to determine that the parking we've provided is appropriate, but this is based more off of their industry experience, noting that ITE provides a great barometer for all of our uses versus this specific industrial use whereby the applicant has experience with.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from the board?
One other thing. So just to get it out on the table, we have 2 PUDs. We have 1 PUD in town. This will be the second. The other PUD is what I would call a semi-public site. The roads are used by the general public. One of the main roads is a cut-through from one of our major roads to get to exit 4, which the public uses on a daily basis. The community uses the facilities that are in there. People from other communities come in and use the facilities that are there. My understanding is that this site is private, that the general public won't necessarily be using it because there's no supermarket that people are going to go to. There's no medical facility that people are going to get their checkups or whatever. It's going to be used by the companies that are in the buildings, but it's still a private site. The roads are owned privately. The sidewalks are owned privately. The parking lots are owned privately. Help me out because you're uneasy with what I'm saying. please.
It's true that the roadways and the sidewalks are all privately owned, privately maintained with no burden on the town. There's a child care center for 90 folks, 90 tots, that absolutely will be encouraged for the public to utilize. There's a general store that will help service the L3 Harris building just up the road. There isn't a lot of through traffic to this development because Akira is a turnaround. You know, there's really no businesses up there other than L3 Warrior, one small entity, and what the applicant is proposing. So it's not a shortcut to anywhere.
Right. So the one site, the one part of the site that could possibly be used by the general public, because as actually has its own, well, has a driveway right off of Akira, and the people that are utilizing that are not necessarily going
They're not
into
going
the
to drive
site-
down into the development for anything.
into the site proper. They're gonna stay right there in that 1,000 feet or whatever it is. And so, I just wanna make that distinction between what is currently a PUD and the differences between this PUD is totally different. I can use apples and oranges, cause we have apples. Oranges, not so much. But it's important to keep that in the back of everyone's mind. This is not what I want. One person, uneducated, non-engineer, no stamps, thinks of it as a non-public site. Thank you.
Thank you. Board, anything else?
That picked an interest in my mind. Within the PUD, are you going to identify what areas are public access and what ones are, in essence, private, where you don't want public to go?
Well, it is a private development. To Bruce's point, there are elements that are available to the public, but they've been strategically located at the perimeter of the development for that purpose. And whether if someone's going to that general store, if someone's bringing their child to childcare, that is not integral to our development. As currently prescribed, this is a private development. There's not necessarily a beacon asking for people to come in and use the common space that is here. It is a private development.
The development's purposeful in the fact that residential and industrial are really divided by the central core roadway. The nature of Nick's roadway design is not a thoroughfare. It is a very slow meandering road with a very, you can't accelerate to anything in this development.
And that was one of the things we thought was an appropriate traffic calming mechanism. The listed speed limit for this development is 20 miles per hour. That's what our roads are designed for. The idea is this is not a thoroughfare. We don't want people at high speeds. The curvilinear nature of our roadways promote that, but also promote it in that we have fairly level, flat roads. We don't have a lot of steep slopes here, at least not in the proposed roadway design.
Thank you. Your timber, steel, concrete bridge. Walk me through that. You have, if I understood you correctly, backing up a little bit, you have an approved plan by the state for this bridge.
We have an engineered plan by a state licensed engineer who is a former state designer for DOT bridges.
But it has not been approved in any.
I don't know that there is a state approval for that.
Okay.
It's not, I don't believe it's a requirement, John.
Our regulations require everything to be built to
To
state
the state
standards.
standard.
And I can
And
assure
that's
you
what
that
I'm
is.
asking. That's what
So,
I'm asking.
so again,
the- I'll potentially bring the engineer to the next meeting, but the engineer has professional licensure stamp. We'll work through, this is another item that is, it's a structure, right? It's almost like a building. So there'll be a statement of special inspections that he'll generate. An engineering firm will check the standards that it will be built by. John, I had said you heard you say you had a few reservations about the wooden deck.
Correct.
Wooden deck is a form. That's really all it is. It's not a structural element. It gets covered with waterproof membrane, just like many other bridges in the state. There's no exposed wood in this bridge except for underneath for the turtles to look at and potentially the wooden guardrails.
And I think those are some of the elements that we need to have further discussion
Yeah,
on.
I'm
It's-
happy to share a further explanation of the bridge with our engineer.
I want to further echo some of the comments that have been made tonight with regards to detention ponds and whatnot. Obviously, you have now a signed approval from the AOT saying it meets a 50-year storm, correct?
Yes, sir.
If I understand, you have not seen that.
So here's the gist of it, Jake. The AOT permit with that drainage report was submitted a couple months ago, Nick?
No, the resubmittal was made 2 days ago. The original submittal?
The original submittal for your AOT approval, what was that based upon?
That would have been made several months ago, yes.
Yeah, several months ago. Did they have any comments on the drainage?
We did, which we worked through and resolved with them. We're very appreciative of their staff making themselves available to walk through a lot of those elements.
So again, what revision number are they on?
We had 2 resubmittals.
Two resubmittals, and what are we on for the town? 2 or 3?
Yes.
So my point being, we are a little more thorough than the people at DES.
I can understand that and respect that, but at the same time, we have something approved by the state that says, hey, this meets the state requirements, and then at the end of the day, if they don't ultimately meet the town's requirements, they're going to have to fix it. Because at the next site plan, no, this doesn't meet the town requirements, they're gonna have to fix it there. So it's not, there's a lot of steps there, so I'm plenty comfortable in saying we can work our way through that. The bridge, I think, is a little bit more to talk about. There was discussion of kids having to walk through a parking lot. Can somebody work me, it was brief, something about.
Show them on the plan.
I can respond to that.
Yeah.
So that's part of the
Get it up on the
childcare.
plan real quick.
I believe that's part of the childcare retail area.
It's up here, right?
So that is in our northmost quadrant, directly adjacent to Kira Way. So what we have is a drop-off area immediately in front of the building that is one way. So in order to enhance the queuing ability, you have to come down the main entrance drive off of Akira. You then make a left where you are queued up to drop off your child. If anybody has children or has been through this process, this is fairly typical as far as the layout. There's supplemental parking for employees and or visitors, but the expectation is this is the pickup and drop off window, not necessarily a drop off and
Mr. Chair,
park in the
aren't
parking
we
lot
gonna
right
get
away.
this
I agree.
minutia?
To a
at the
degree, I
site?
agree, but
I
it
mean,
is a part of the infrastructure. I just wanted a little bit more clarification on it, because it sounded like to me there was kids walking across the main road here.
Well, when they go to build the building, it's gonna come before us, and we're
I
gonna
agree.
see it,
I agree.
and then we'll beat them up.
Because it's
Some
gonna be the
clarification.
dovetailing of what's infrastructure, and what's on a site plan. 'cause it's a
Understood.
lot of site-
Um,
Infrastructure.
There was, just for the record, there were a couple of places throughout the plan. One is,
I mean, this is where I'm getting at it,
One
because it's a
is-
comment from
I mean, there are-
staff, so. You know what
there
I
are missing gaps. No, let's reiterate. There's gaps throughout the plan here and there, but I understand that that will come in later phases. But there is one crosswalk within the residential area that goes right into a parking spot. And so that,
Well, but
that will come
yeah,
in
but see,
later.
this is where it gets crazy. So I've said it before. This really is a cartoon drawing. This is not an as-built, right? This is what could be here. We went through the same thing
Right.
with the Woodmont project, where things changed, things evolved, things got smaller, things got bigger, whatever. And so I don't understand what we're doing. I don't get it. I don't understand any of the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission that I think you signed it. I don't understand anything that was on there that has to do with this today.
Okay, so I guess that leads you to the question. This is an infrastructure plan.
Right.
So those are infrastructure comments, But we're also hearing today, so that you're gonna approve an infrastructure plan. Are you going to hear in months down the road, well, you've approved the infrastructure plan, there's the drawing, so you've approved that. But what I'm hearing from the applicant is, no, these details will be worked out at a site plan. That's what I'm hearing today.
Well, we heard that from staff as well,
So
right?
I didn't hear that 2 months ago when we provided our development of regional impact comments. It's very different. We were looking at the big picture, now we're getting into an infrastructure level, and so I think that it's important that you all recognize what level of detail are you approving? If you recognize that some of this is coming in a future phase, great, that's what I'm hearing tonight. But how would we know that, right? Back in May.
Yeah, that's fair.
Thank
That's
you.
fair.
But Tony, though, there are a few areas, though, that Sylvia, I almost called you Cynthia, Sylvia brought up again that where the crossing of the main road should be looked at a little closer. Like the one that the crosswalk goes to the parking spot.
So, Mr. Chair, we appreciate that look ahead, and that'll give us the opportunity to rectify any of those demons as part of those site plan packages.
Thank you. All right, so this is a public hearing. I'm going to open it up to the public. Anybody from the public have anything they'd like to say? Evening, sir. Name and address, please.
Hi, Bob Mill, 569 Mim Road, Londonderry. My family abuts, Headland abuts, Londonderry Hordens. And one thing that has happened is Londonderry Horden has posted their land, no trespassing, no hunting, and people traditionally has hunted off at Ikea Way and Kitty Hawk, and you got the waterwork road that goes between the two of them. They go back there and hunt, and that keeps the deer population, particularly help to keep it under control. Since the land had been posted, the deer population has increased, and it created damage to my trees, my crops, and it is something that is, I'm sure no one has saw the potential effects of it. And what's going to happen once you start clearing approximately 60 acres of that wildlife? Where is it going to go? It's going to wind up in anywhere is undeveloped, and part of it going to be me. That's going to be a major problem. It's already a major problem for me. The other thing is, if you want rock crushing, just come up my way. You already got it at Page Road in Route 28. You can hear it. Pretty good area around it. There's been rock crushing on part of Londonderry Horden areas already, and Tebow, and the area around me over the years. So why not have some of the rock crushing down on the south end of Londonderry, like you were talking about earlier? Might be nice for change.
Spread the love, right?
Some Londonderry Hordens coming up pretty soon. Once they start doing all the infrastructure, they'll be black and dealing with the rock. So that's where I stand tonight. Is there any way I could, people come to me, and if they can hunt, and they tell me, oh, I was, you hunt up there on, off of Kitty Hawk, and say, if I could, shoot, some of those people, give, their name, give, the name of, somebody from Londonderry Hordens, and let them work out a possibility of hunting with permission of the owner. Would that be possible?
I don't think that's necessarily something we would deal with
Yeah, but
at a
I'm just
planning
trying
board
to-
level.
Trying to bring up the subject to
Mike?
anybody that might be in the room, that might be able to help me. I can give them a name and telephone number, to if someone is standing there. Hey, can I hunt back there? I used to go in there, and I can only have so many people on my land, hunting at any one time before they're literally sitting on each other, 50 feet away with a gun.
Yeah, we don't want that.
No, but I don't mind hunting with permission. The people who come to the landowner and ask permission, can I hunt on your land? They are the responsible people that you want. So it's just something that unintended consequences that Londonderry Holden did not think through before they did it, and probably never even thought about it. And it's something, and what's gonna happen once you clear off 60 acres? That all that wildlife got to go somewhere, and that should be part of the management plan of this lot before it is approved.
Yeah, that was
Mike?
brought up before about the wildlife corridor.
I mean, it should be part of the plan, where that wildlife's gonna go. What type of damage may it do on other people's land if you increase the number of deer and other animals on adjoining lots?
We've got two things here, Mike, if you could address the hunting side of things.
Thank you,
please.
Mr. Chair. I know from our police department that there have been some longstanding concerns with encampments on this property, and I surmise that is part of why it is posted against trespassing, to allow the owner to address some of that. Great points about when you clear significant acreage that does displace wildlife, but I'm confident that will be managed through this process as required by our regulations and by law.
Thank you.
I can concur there was a large homeless population that the trespass signs were put up for.
Thank you.
I mean, I realize that problem, but you also created another problem by trying to solve one problem. Yeah, Londonderry Holdens did. Okay, well, I just that's it for me for tonight. Thank you very
sir.
much. Hopefully I can have somebody I can hand off potential hunting people to in Londonderry Holden organization.
Here you go, sir.
Okay, that's great.
What you don't know is he gave him my card.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much.
Have a good night,
Yeah,
sir.
okay.
Anything
I
else from
think
the
I got
public?
people who might be interested in hunting back.
Sure,
there.
have him give me a call.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Could somebody remind me not to go to Mr. Merrill's land? Sound like a lot of people running around with guns. I was just kidding, Bob. I was just kidding. I was just kidding.
If you want to go a little bit more wild, go on the other side of 28. The
I
east
was
side
just
of
kidding.
28, between Page Road
Just go to Verani's.
and 28. You got a little bit more. It's more of the Wild West over there.
I
where
apologize to
control it
everyone.
on the east
I
side
was
of
just
the
kidding.
road, but not the west. I mean, on the west side of the road, but not on the east side as well.
Thank you, Mr. Merrill.
All right, we'll see.
Thank you. Mr. Breslin.
Oh, I don't have to, no.
Oh, yes, you
Ray
do.
Breslin, 3 Gary Drive. Okay, so, I don't want to hold this up, but we're talking about infrastructure or infrastructure, whatever. But there was also a discussion about traffic, although I don't know if that's part of what you're going to decide on here. But at the last meeting, or one of the meetings, Brian Johnson from the fire department had some concerns about fire trucks getting up there and maneuvering around this proposed layout. And I don't know if that's something that you're concerned about this evening or not. The other thing is, there was discussion about stormwater runoff. And I don't know if people are aware, but there are several brooks that run off that high elevation, and particularly in the springtime, there's one that runs down across, what's the name of the road? The one that goes over towards the airport there.
Grenier Field? Grenier Field
Harvey
Road?
Road or
Grenier Field.
Grenier?
I think that's Grenier Field.
Yeah.
You got it right. That runs underneath that and then runs down into Little Coas Brook. Okay? And which, within the past, I don't know, year and a half or so, there was a bridge culvert put underneath the perimeter road. And that brook just rips down through there. And as a matter of fact, washes away some of the work that was done there that has since been corrected. The point is there's an awful lot of runoff that runs off that high elevation. And I understand there's discussion about having retaining ponds or catch basins or whatever. Are there intents of having catch basins on the roadway up here? And if so, where would they go? Would they go into the retention ponds? And are there catch basins, stormwater catch basins off the roadway in the parking lots that are part of this plan?
Nick, if you could answer briefly.
I'd be happy to. Yes, there are catch basins within our roadways, as well as there will be in our future parking lots. Those areas are routed to pretreatment practices, which are primarily forebays or deep sump catch basins, and then into either an infiltrative or filtrative practice designed in accordance with the town and state requirements. After treatment, it is discharged along existing flow courses, which in the primary element of this project is an existing wetland to the west of the project site.
Thank you.
Could you repeat that, the last sentence?
To the west of the project site, there's an existing wetland and flow course. Ultimately, that is where stormwater currently discharges. So we've mimicked that with the proposed design, and it'll also discharge to that area.
In the what of that area? Sorry.
Relative to its location, it's westerly. So if we look at the graphic that's on the board above us, middle of the page directly to the left is where there's an existing wetland complex.
Right, right.
There's a very large wetland complex that essentially bisects the site, draining east to west. It really mimics that existing flow pattern.
Okay, thank you.
You've demonstrated turning radiuses for the fire department?
Yes, sir.
I would assume. That's correct. I
think
believe
it's been
Brian's
done.
issue was hydrant location.
Yeah, we had a little bit of mix-up on that last one.
Yeah.
That
Has
was
that been
immediately
rectified?
addressed, and I think Mike. can
We
speak
talked
for-
about that, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So we're good.
Yes.
That's my understanding, but there is, I mean, the board should rest assured that there is a requirement to follow up. There's a condition of approval in the engineering memo to follow up with the fire department.
Correct.
And we'll, as has been pointed out repeatedly, we'll have the opportunity to catch any of that when we approve the site plans.
Thank you.
So we to understand that Brian Johnson has approved that?
We are to understand that prior to signing this plan, Mr. Johnson will be in agreement with everything that's on the plan. Yes, sir.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
And so, I see nothing about underground retention of water coming off the roofs of these buildings and also off the roadways and parking lots. There is no underground retention, is that correct?
No, there is a component of the project that will rely on underground storage and infiltration of stormwater that then outfalls to our downstream practices that are to the west. So it's very much a treatment train. It's one of the philosophies that most towns and the state does prefer to see, that you're really interconnecting each one of those elements.
Thank
So
you.
there's a good example of one of those subsurface stormwater systems, which then outfalls to the stormwater basin below.
Okay, just one other thing, and that is fire protection. It was a little hard to understand. I'm sitting back there, what was said in that regard. There was something about a pump house that is going to meet the requirements, I believe. But we're talking about 4-story residential buildings. And typically, in my experience, I mean, I used to work on emergency fire pumps. Typically, with a multi-story building, there's a requirement to have fire pumps, and a lot of times in the buildings, so that you have sufficient pressure for the building at height. Are there any fire pumps for the residential buildings other than what we're talking about, a pump house, which is down on a Currow Way or something?
Ray, I believe if there was a need for those, that would come at the site plan level when they come to present their next phase of the plan.
Okay.
And I can report that based on flow tests, as soon as the pump house pump is upgraded, there'll be sufficient water and water pressure for all automatic sprinkler systems in the buildings.
And hydrants.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Anything else from the public? Seeing none, I will close public comment. Any additional board input?
So I have a question, maybe a little premature, but I think we have to be very clear on what we're approving tonight.
Yeah.
I'm not clear at this point in time of
It's a
what we're
little,
approving.
I think, a little confusing at this point.
Yeah, and I think, Mike, you can probably help us through
Yeah.
that. I believe, to me, I'm comfortable with everything but the bridge. Is that a fair assumption of the board here?
I think that's right, but I'd feel better if we walked through it
Absolutely.
one by one. So
Yeah,
there-
let's pay attention to the details.
there is a waiver. There is a waiver request, and that was addressed by Mr. Golan. Staff did not feel that we could support it based on the information that was provided. Additional information was provided, and I will just allow John to speak to the waiver request, if that makes sense, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'll speak to it immediately. The waiver request was received after 5 o'clock. I have not had a chance to look at it. Typically, a waiver request is specific. We converse with the applicant. Where is it? So it's clear and we can have that discussion. We don't have to go searching it for it in the report and make our own guesses, if you will.
And just
I do not support the waiver request at this time.
Just to clarify, Mr. Chair, I believe that the waiver request itself was submitted timely, or with the resubmit. It was, I think, some supplemental information that was submitted tonight.
As part of the staff memo that we received, it said there was some uncertainty as to where it was located, so we pointed staff to where that information was located and specifically included it in a resubmittal, just so it would be top of mind.
So this is specific to 3.07 G2.
Yes.
Am I correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
So that information has come in, but has not been reviewed by staff.
Correct.
Yeah, that's
My understanding.
That's correct.
It came in. I haven't looked at it.
So
I don't, Mr. Chair, I don't know if the applicant would agree or disagree with this, but it seems to me, and I'm not an engineer, that this is not something that would prevent them from, I mean,
Correct.
let's say that this was conditionally approved and all the conditions were cleared tomorrow except this one.
Correct.
I don't think it would stop them from getting started. And like I said, we are going to have them here pretty regularly going forward.
Correct.
But they may disagree with that. I'm not sure.
I agree. Obviously, we're gonna have to leave it up to the board on this waiver here. But, granted, we do have some information in front of us. This would, I don't see really much of an issue with it.
What's the waiver? What's 307 G2? I can't find it, sorry.
It allows drainage pipes with less than 2 feet per second cleansing velocity. Staff does not support the waiver because it does not contain sufficient information about the select locations where it will apply. TF Moran has come back and provided what they're considering sufficient information. And I guess the spot where staff is stuck is they feel as though they haven't had enough time to review the sufficient information or that TF Moran has provided.
Mr. Chair, may I suggest that you ask Mr. Golan to just describe narratively where these locations are so that it may give the board some more information?
Sure.
I'd be happy to do so. If I could direct you relative to the plan we have before you, if we go to the northeast quadrant of the site at the cul-de-sac, actually the plan.
You want
here-
that plan?
Yeah, actually that plan's perfect. If we go to the northeast corner.
What page are
there's
you on, Mike?
This is C 17, page 17.
Thank you.
So in this area, you have catch basin 1A. This was added as part of a design revision that was requested as part of the third-party review. There's a very small area that drains to that. Because of the need for a 15-inch pipe, again, that discussion of how do we determine velocity, it's a function of what drains to that area and the area of the pipe. There's insufficient area as currently designed to provide that cleansing velocity. That would be one of our first elements. If we work our way.
And from an engineering standpoint, has a pipe, can you steepen up the pipe neck?
In this case,
Slope.
steepening up the pipe did not provide any effect on providing additional
So
velocity.
that's the dialogue that we have.
Yep.
When we're in the war room.
So having the opportunity to receive the request for additional information, we had gone through each pipe network today to validate the fact that there is not the ability to steepen the pipes such that an additional velocity could be provided. In some cases, these pipes in and of themselves are placeholders because we have a drainage manhole that will be a future roof drain connection. So the pipe network that drains from drain manhole to future catch basin has nothing going to it now. Hence, it has zero velocity because there is no flow. So those are some of the examples that we have in this instance.
And that would have been supported by me again, had we had the opportunity for the dialogue.
So that example is on the second page of the summary table. That is DMH number RD8, which drains to CB35. You can see that it's zeros across the board. There's nothing that drains into that. There's nothing that exits to it. Similarly, as we look down that page where we talk about CB100 to CB101, CB101 to basin number 3, if we can flip back to that same page.
To the plan.
To the plan, yep. If we go to the southeast corner of the site, yep, and right in that drainage area, you'll see that there is a system of catch basins that are CB's 101, 100, 101 that drain to basin 3. It's a very small tributary area. It's a couple hundred square feet. Because it's, again, such a small area that drains to it at this time, you don't get those cleansing velocities. Now, what will be upstream of this area will be some components of the On-Point and Envision 60K buildings that will increase some flows, which will help benefit that cleansing velocity. But again, this is just a function of it's a larger pipe because that's what the regulations require. And we aren't able to provide that cleansing velocity. The other area that I can draw your attention to, if we go westerly across the site to that stormwater management system that is an underground, directly below your cursor to the south. Yep. There is a relatively small area that drains to DMH 72, which then drains directly into the storm tech system. It has, again, a lesser velocity because it's an area of grass that's draining to it. So it's not able to provide that functionality. So in each one of these instances, you can see this is really at the headwater of whatever that pipe network is, and that's why you don't see a larger flow. And again, because we don't have that larger flow with a large pipe, we're unable to accommodate the cleansing velocity at 2 feet per second.
John, 2 minutes ago, I think you said you agreed to all this, but you...
No, I do not agree. I said that's the discussion that we typically have when we're doing the design review. I have not looked at these locations in detail and what the problem is. My reluctancy is, again, you give them a blanket waiver, not knowing where these were and why, what's the justification. It's your call.
Mr. Chair, may I ask the applicant a question?
Sure.
So, what would occur if the board granted these waivers and they shouldn't have? Is that going to result in an increase in sedimentation in these pipes?
No.
What is it? What would the outcome be if basically the board waived this condition, and really they should have held to the regulation?
The reality is there's an operation and maintenance plan that'll be approved as part of this. It's governed by your stormwater permit that is for the town, as well as the alteration of terrain permit that's been received. It requires them to maintain these systems, their catch basins, their pipe networks, the downstream stormwater management systems, to make sure they continue to provide their functionality. AOT has also now instituted a policy where they are checking to make sure people are doing their inspections. Those inspections are required either on a biannual or annual inspection period based off the nature of that system. If it's a pre-treatment system, meaning a 4-bay, you're looking at it once a year. If it's a treatment system, you're looking at it twice a year. So there is, again, that system of belt and suspenders to evaluate these areas to make sure they are functioning the way they are supposed to. And it is the obligation of the applicant via the permits that are approved to maintain them.
Thank you. Jason?
So, I guess the other thing on this is this being a private development that you guys will be owning and maintaining. If this does start to back up, it's gonna be on you guys.
That is correct.
It's not a public roadway that's gonna be, or, you know, a public development that gets bought and sold and you guys never speak of it again.
Correct. So it's in the
If it
applicant's
backs
best
up,
interest.
it's on you guys.
Yep, correct. So it's in the applicant's best interest to
And
maintain
there
the
is
infrastructure.
the inspections to support
Mhm.
exactly what you just said.
So at the last meeting, John testified, and I won't put words in his mouth, but he said, except for the downstream values, the houses, the buildings, the runways, the whatever, and I didn't mean to put words in your mouth, but correct me if I'm wrong.
I said what? What about the downstream?
You said, yes, it's gonna fail on their site, but it's gonna affect all the downstream stuff, potentially, because
Possibly.
we don't know.
Yeah.
But, can I continue?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. So, you had that look on your eyes. Really scary sometimes. Sometimes it's because he's sleeping, but, so,
Crowd.
so I've seen this before in developments. It seems to me it's almost the cart before the horse, because you're building all of the roads and all the drainage before the buildings are there to shed water to have the pipes work correctly.
That's an element of truth, yes, sir.
And in many of these, the developments I've been involved in, that I've seen and trudged through the mud, they close up the drains so that you don't get the sedimentation, and then they don't have to go in and clean them out or spend a lot of money or take them out or whatever until the buildings are built. But there are lots of places all over the country, including New Hampshire, that do all this infrastructure first and deal with problems associated with this. Pipe is too big, pipe is too small, not enough water, can't cleanse itself, too much water, cleansing itself too much, whatever, before the buildings are built and it's handled. So our question, from what we're gonna be asked is, are we okay with that? Because they're building all the roads, all the pipes, all the whatever, and the buildings aren't there shedding water to make them work correctly. To your point, Jason, well, that's on them, they're gonna have to clean them out. To John's point, our town engineer, could potentially be a downstream problem, and that's where we're at.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I think that it would be beneficial to ask the applicant to speak to, and he began to do it, using the language of this standard, what the hardship is, why they can't comply with this regulation. I think that, at least with respect to the first one that we looked at, increasing the pipe didn't solve, or holding the regulation didn't solve the problem.
Yeah.
I think that you should also ask him to, reference the downstream guy. The last criteria here, criteria C, is that the waiver can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good. So I think you should have him speak to that's essentially a safety factor. Whether there's a hardship, whether granting the waiver is going to have the desired effect or not, and then whether somebody's going to be harmed by it. I think that's what he should speak to.
Be happy to. So one element of this, I'm going to read directly from the waiver request because we had some foresight and relative to that. So on behalf of our client, Londonderry Holding LLC, we respectfully request a waiver from Section 307G2 of the site plan regulations to allow drainage pipes less than a 2 foot per second cleansing velocity. Due to the following factors that limit velocity, we are requesting a waiver to provide less than 2 feet per second cleansing velocity in several select locations, noting this next sentence was added today, as indicated on the attached 25-year pipe summary. Minimum 15-inch pipe diameter. Again, with larger pipes, you have lesser velocities. Very small contributing areas at the most upstream portions of the closed drainage system. Again, in every instance, this is the first pipe in the network. So wherever that first catch basin is that's ultimately draining to our infrastructure, it's that first segment of pipe because there's such a small area that's currently draining to it. We acknowledge that that will change as part of the post-development for future phases because we're going to be adding some flow in certain instances. The third one, roof drain piping with no flows. Which is intended for future connections. To the point that was made earlier, there's going to be buildings. Those buildings have roof drains. Those roof drains, in this instance, directly connect to that drain manhole, for which that pipe has a zero velocity because there's nothing flowing through it currently. In all instances, the public is going to be equally protected because the applicant still has the responsibility to maintain his drainage system. That drainage system is maintained via your town permit and also via the alteration of terrain permit that we've already obtained that specifically calls for an operation and maintenance plan for those drainage areas. We feel this request is appropriate and consistent with the expectations of the planning board, and that this site plan for infrastructure associated with the Village on Technology Hill upholds the spirit of the regulations and public convenience, and welfare will not be adversely affected. As such, we request a waiver of Section 307G2. Now, having the benefit of having permitted other projects here in Londonderry, as well as TF Moran as a company with 50-plus years of experience, this has been a fairly consistent waiver we've asked for, and for these reasons specifically. So I don't feel this is an outlandish request. I feel this is something you have seen before, and that the reasoning that we're presenting is also consistent with those prior requests.
So I would like some clarity on the approval of this. To Tony's point, once we have buildings, it changes. But because this is a phased development, when we approve this, do we approve it for all time, or we build one phase of this, then the throughput changes, we have an opportunity to get it right?
It would be readdressed at every single phase.
It's actually kind of not phased, though.
Well, from the standpoint of the contributing, sorry to interrupt, specific to these networks that are all associated with the residential and to some element the childcare retail that's being added to this, we are increasing to those pipes. So when we come back for those elements, I'm either requesting those same waivers or I'm requesting fewer of them because I now have a higher cleansing velocity in my pipes because I do have larger flows
Because now
contributing
you
to
have
them.
water going to,
Yep.
yeah.
Don't you have a couple of pipes in the road? Don't you have a couple of pipes in the road?
Yes, the couple of the ones that we had talked about at the very end of the network.
So it's in the roadway as well, not just, the flow is
Mr.
gonna be
Chair.
in the road.
No, I recognize that. Go ahead, Lynn.
Mr. Chair, I think all we're waiting for on approving this waiver is for Mr. Trotter to do his analysis of the data that you received. Can we conditionally approve this waiver pending John's approval and just move on? This is,
I don't think so, because a condition is usually, no, I don't think we could do that, Mike, right? And I think that's why we're here
I
talking.
mean,
about it.
I don't recollect doing
I
this
don't
in the
think you can
past.
conditionally or prospectively approve a waiver.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying, Lynn, I just don't see, I know.
It would be a first.
I think we just need to,
Sometimes.
I think as a board, we need to make a decision how we want to do it, and if the waiver's denied, then they have to address it with John.
We wouldn't be here if this developer was developing it the way most people do. And most of the time, they do it because of financial reasons. So they build a part of it, they build the road, they build the drainage of it, and they put up whatever they're gonna put up, and that's done. Then they put up another phase, and they do the road, and they do the drainage, and the difference here is, I have to be careful how I say this, so I won't say it. What they're doing here is they're just building all the roads and infrastructure, and then they're gonna site the buildings.
Yeah.
And that's why we're having this conversation.
Yep. Be
So-
it the other way around, we wouldn't be having this
Correct.
conversation because they, yeah.
How about B?
So I'm ready to move on, if
So-
anyone else is.
Yeah.
10 minutes ago.
I think Lynn is.
10 minutes.
I'm looking.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead.
I will make a motion that we grant a waiver to section 3.07.G.2 for the reasons so stated. And also, the reason for granting this waiver is an alternative site planning and building design approach meets the design objectives as stated in the regulations equally well or better than would the compliance with the regulations. Period.
Motion from Mark. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Lynn. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the chair votes in the affirmative. The waiver has been granted.
But I think the probability
Mike, did we have another waiver?
rides on the.
So we had some, no, I don't believe that there was some.
Shouldn't be necessary. Again, we took a little bit of a belt and suspenders approach to make sure you had all the information that you needed to be able to act on the application. That waiver would only be required if you deemed it necessary, and that was in regards to Manchester Waterworks and that utility clearance letter.
So ultimately, what's gonna happen is before the plan gets signed, he's gonna have to have
Yeah.
the clearance
Yep.
letter from Manchester Water.
Absolutely.
That's what's gonna end up
Yeah.
happening.
Yep.
Well, one of the things, though, speaking about that, was we were gonna have somebody come in, Manchester Waterworks or whatever, to say what they're gonna do with the building, that they're pulling the generator to the outside. Well, what is it? How big is it? What's the noise gonna be?
You would I don't know if that will trigger a site plan amendment. It may be approvable.
We would only see it if what they present, if it does trigger a site plan amendment, it would then come back to the board.
It would unless it triggers an administrative amendment, which comes to the board for signature, but is processed administratively.
But otherwise, we're coming back to you for at least informational purposes as a utility to show what those improvements are.
I'm good.
I'm good.
Okay. Do you want me to continue?
Yeah, please.
So I think that, let me just throw this out there, and I think we can discuss whether it should be a condition or just the board can have a consensus and express its understanding. So
Yeah.
I think that we have talked several times tonight about essentially the following, that because of the phased approach to both review and development, adjustments to the approved infrastructure plan may be required as the site plans are reviewed and approved, and staff recommends it be expressly understood that the town reserves the right to require such changes in its reasonable discretion. So that's the situation about having to go back and dig up the pipe. The pipe being part of what will now be a conditionally approved and ultimately approved infrastructure plan. But if changes are necessary to this infrastructure plan that's approved, it is, and I didn't hear any dispute about this from the applicant, there may need to be modifications to this program. So I don't think that needs to be a condition. I just think that it's important that the board express that yes, that we have a consensus on that.
Lynn,
I almost think that should be a condition.
And that's fine.
I think
So-
that's important.
So what I will do is, I think for the record, so the minutes are clear, I'll refer to that as planning condition A. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So then the next up is, we have the Stantec third-party memo, which is the town's memo dated August 7th, which is incorporated into this by reference. As is typical, those conditions should be made part of the board's approval.
I agree. Absolutely.
And that will happen in the ordinary course.
Yep.
Stormwater management, and keeping with Mr. Secretary's recommendation, this could certainly be a condition of approval. I think it's the case whether it's conditioned as on approval or not. Staff recommends it be made clear that future phases of this project will not be approved if the stormwater flows associated therewith are found to overwhelm the approved detention basins. I'll refer to that as planning comment B. Planning comment C is the recommendation to break off the bridge unless the board wants to treat that differently and address that at a future time. I think staff's feeling on that is I think I'd be uncomfortable handling that at the staff level, given
Yeah.
the importance of that structure.
Yep.
Planning comment C.
Okay.
Planning comment D. There's a staff concern about deconflicting the non-residential uses from the residential uses. Staff recommends the board condition approval on satisfactory demonstration the proposed network poses no safety or nuisance risks, for example, by appropriate signage or other traffic control measures. Planning comment D. And then I think that the understanding is that the board reserves its rights to comment on the internal sidewalk system, on bicycle infrastructure, on rail trail connectivity, on the configuration of the childcare drop-off and parking arrangement. Do you have anything else?
Through each individual site plan itself.
For each individual site plan. And all of that being the case, Sylvia, do you have any input at this point?
And not to limit to those, that there'll be other
Yeah,
comments.
that's a good point. So those were areas of particular concern that were identified, but the town and the board should reserve all of their rights that exist, whether we say we're reserving them or not, to exercise its full jurisdiction as we move forward with this project.
Correct.
Good?
Are we calling that planning comment E?
Yes, well, let's
Thank
do
you.
that. Thank you. All of that being the case, Mr. Chairman, and the board being persuaded that the stormwater management basins are appropriately sized for the infrastructure program that you are conditionally approving tonight, staff recommends the planning board conditionally approve this application with a notice of decision to read substantially as follows. Motion to grant conditional approval of the infrastructure site plan associated with the Village on Technology Hill PUD, including roadways, water, sewer, electric, and gas utility services, zoned Industrial 1, Industrial 2, and Village on Technology Hill PUD. Londonderry Holdings LLC, owner and applicant, map 28, lots 31-6, 29-2, and map 17, lots 2, 5-3, 5-4, 5-5, dated January 12th, 2024, and last revised July 18th, 2024, with the precedent conditions to be fulfilled within 120 days of approval, and prior to plan signature and general and subsequent conditions of approval be fulfilled, as noted in the staff memorandum of August 7th, 2024, on the usual conditions that follow in the staff recommendation memo.
So that would be on precedent conditions 1 through 7, as well as planning conditions A through E. Is that correct?
That's correct, and the general and subsequent conditions 1 through 7.
Yep. Okay. Anybody want to put that into,
So moved.
thank you. Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes in the affirmative, and you guys are all set. Thank you.
Well said, Mike.
Thank you.
For the next site plan.
Nicely done, Mike.
Well said, Tony.
Thank you.
Let's take a quick 5-minute break before we get to the next ones, okay?
I jumped on that one.
The seventh inning stretch.
Yeah.
Mr. Bruce.
It's happened before, so this is not the first time. It won't be the last
I think
either.
they always, we were good to have on a good stretch of
Why don't you? Yeah.
5-hour meetings,
Yeah.
6-hour
Thank you.
meetings.
Thank you. Safe travels.
We're gonna come back.
We are going to get into new plans. We have a public hearing on an application for a conditional use permit for approximately 40 square feet of permanent wetland impact, 38,026 square feet of temporary wetland impact, and 66,964 square feet of wetland buffer impact for equipment access and work pad placement associated with the proposed structure replacements located within the Conservation Overlay District for the 380 and 326 transmission line in the areas of Dan Hill Road, Severance Drive, Colonial Drive, Seasons Lane, zoned AR1, Public Service Company of New Hampshire, doing business as Eversource Energy. We need to check this for completeness. Looking for a motion to accept this application as complete.
Move, Mr. Chair.
Motion, do I have a second? I have a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes in the affirmative. The application has been accepted as complete. All right, folks, come on up.
Thank you.
Take the things out of my pockets. Good evening.
Evening, sir.
Thank you for having us tonight. I was nervous we were going to get continued there for a second, so
Thank you for not.
When have you ever seen us afraid of a late night? Come on.
You get to see a good slice of planning board work, you know?
That was good. I learned a lot in the last 2 hours.
A lot he never wanted to know. All right, go ahead, sir.
And you'll never get back.
So my name is Connor Madison. I'm from GZA. I'm here as a consultant on behalf of Eversource. I'm also here with
Travis Yando, licensing and permitting for Eversource.
And we're here tonight to present a conditional use permit, as you introed, for, I believe it was 40 square feet of permanent wetland impact, as well as temporary wetland impact and permanent wetland buffer impact. The project before you, just so I don't forget, the schedule for this is proposed for this fall into next winter. So March 2026 would be when this project will be wrapping up, or is proposed to be wrapping up.
Sorry, correction, March 2025.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think it's this fall and this winter. is
No,
what you're
that was a good correction.
Yep.
This project is proposing to replace a total of 18 utility poles from wood to steel. Every year, Eversource inspects their lines and their transmission line poles, and every year it comes back with inspection data. And when inspection data fails, it's usually that wood poles have cracks in it or woodpecker holes. When cracks or woodpecker holes occur, water is allowed to enter, insects enter, and basically the wood pole just rots from the inside out. So this year, 18 utility poles did come back as requiring replacement with steel. Those roads are Dan Hill, there's one transmission pole, Wiley Hill, there's 8, High Range Road 3, and Rockingham Road, which I believe is just 28. We have 6 poles to be replaced. This is the same type of work that's been ongoing throughout the years. Replacement from wood poles to steel within the same alignment, no introduction of new wire, no replacement of wire, and no expanding the right-of-way or any tree clearing with this project. For the permitting that has started so far from a state level, we do have an approved statutory permit by notification for wetland impacts. We did just get that approval today, so the town will be sent a mailed hard copy from the state with that approval. We also have a pending alteration of terrain permit. The alteration of terrain permit application is required for upland impacts over 100,000 square feet. What this covers as far as this project goes is a 16-foot wide permanent gravel road that will go through the right-of-way, as well as a 100 by 100 foot gravel work area around each structure for replacement. In the alteration of terrain permit application, we do discuss that 100 by 100 work area around each structure to be reduced to a 30 by 60 by the end of this project. That 30 by 60 will be staying next to the structure in case of emergency and a bucket truck needs to access the structure and go up to the line. However, the remaining work pad the gravel will be brought back and reseeded. Both of these permit applications, the statutory permit by notification and alteration of terrain, require extensive New Hampshire Fish and Game and Natural Heritage Bureau coordination for both rare animals, non-game, and plants. We received from Fish and Game, a majority of the project will be done in wintertime. except for 2 structures that happen to also be an overwintering turtle habitat. So they requested we do that work during the active season to give those turtles, the theory is to give those turtles room to swim away instead of matting or placing matting, construction matting on top of a hibernating turtle. That's their theory. And then the remainder of the project will be done under that winter time of year, once again, ending in March 2025. Got it right this time. For Natural Heritage Bureau, there's also quite a few plants in this right-of-way that have been surveyed year in year. They're actually doing extremely well. So there's 5 plants that require to be surveyed. We surveyed 3 of them, and so far have found quite a few of those. We have 2 more plants that are waiting for late August to survey. And in the past, when we surveyed this right-of-way, we found hundreds of them as well. So I anticipate finding hundreds again. As for construction, all work will follow the 2019 best management practices for utility maintenance projects. What that entails is that all wetland impacts will be temporary and we'll use construction matting. The permanent impact is a new one that we're presenting to the town. Basically, from a state point of view, some things have changed. So now when we are replacing an existing structure that is in a wetland, we are replacing it or installing the steel next to the wood about 5 feet away, 5 to 10 feet. So if that wood is currently in a wetland, we do have to replace the steel structure about 5 to 10 feet away from that existing pole. And if it's still in the wetland, that is a permanent impact in the eyes of the state at this moment. No rules have changed, just some interpretation of the rules. So that's where that 40 square feet comes in, because each one of these structures actually have 2 poles. So that's in coordination with 326 structure 45. To go further about that utility maintenance manual, timber matting will be used. It will be ensured clean prior to entering the site, as well as while on the site and exiting the site. We'll have GZA out there weekly monitoring for erosion controls, inspections. The erosion controls that we'll be using is silt sock and silt fence, no straw wattle or plastic weldings allowed per Fish and Game on this site. So we'll be out there weekly inspecting the entire site. I don't believe I have much more. The project schedule. The last one, we did go to the Conservation Commission, I believe, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, and we discussed in length ATV use. It's a common issue throughout the right-of-ways in basically the state of New Hampshire. So they had some questions about the gates. We are looking into the gates right now. We know one off of Wiley Hill is
damaged and
due for some fixing.
Some repairs.
That did not make it onto the plans, so we will be putting on the plans a little gate icon to ensure that that will be repaired by the end of this project. I know they conditioned it, so I just wanted to address that now. We have not revised the plans per their request at this moment. We're also looking in throughout the right-of-way for other gates that might need to be repaired. We have to coordinate with landowners if Eversource doesn't own that parcel, so that will take some time, but
just an example, so the one off Wiley Hill we know is damaged. That is on an Eversource parcel, so we can go ahead and make that decision our own. But in terms of other gates that could be potential locations, we would need to get further have further coordination and acceptance from landowners on that as well. So
thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is anything else on that?
I think you guys are good.
I think that covered it. Yeah. If you have any questions, feel free to ask
John.
away.
Mike is
Mike
running the show tonight.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, as was noted, this did go to the Conservation Commission. They were favorable to it with the request to show those gates that are in need of repair or replacement. All of that being said, based on the information available to date, we would recommend that the planning board approve this with the motion to read as indicated on the memo.
Thank you. Board.
I think it's pretty
All right.
straightforward.
Being a public hearing, I'll open it up to the public. Does the public have anything they'd like to say? Seeing none, I will close public comment, bring it back to the board. Board.
Chair.
Yes, sir.
We'll make a motion to grant approval of a conditional use permit for 40 square feet of permanent wetland impact, 38,026 square feet of temporary wetland impact, and 66,964 square feet of wetland buffer impact for equipment access and work pad placement associated with the proposed structure replacements located within the Conservation Overlay District for the 380 and 326 transmission line in the areas of Dan Hill Road, Severance Drive, Colonial Drive, and Seasons Lane. This is zoned Agricultural Residential 1, Public Service Company of New Hampshire, doing business as Energy, Eversource Energy is the applicant.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. I have a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes in the affirmative. And your CUP has been granted.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Have a nice evening.
You too. All right. Now we have a non-binding review and discussion in accordance with RSA 674, 54 for a governmental land use for the replacement of the NHDOT 512 patrol and salt shed along with associated site improvements. 469 Mammoth Road, map 15, lot 107, zoned AR1, state of New Hampshire, Department of Public Works and Highways is the owner and applicant. Anybody? Gentlemen.
You're,
We saved the best for last.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's go with that.
Apparently, you're the only ones that think so. Everyone else is gone.
We have that effect on people.
So,
The
you want me
floor
to
is
talk
yours,
now,
sir.
or are you?
The floor is yours, sir.
All right. So, yeah, Gary Clifford, State of New Hampshire DOT Maintenance District 5. I'm here with Rich Radwanski, District 5 Maintenance Engineer. Thank you for letting us come to show you what we're hoping to accomplish here. So, yeah, we're essentially trying to redevelop our existing property there a little bit, and remove our 70-year-old building that has gone beyond its useful life, and replace it with a new patrol shed. One of the errors that is in the plans that these are very draft plans at this point, is it says replacement of a patrol shed and salt shed. We're not replacing the salt shed, so I want to make sure you understand that. It came down to dollars and cents. So when we did our preliminary engineering estimate, it was going to cost us more money than we had budgeted. So we stopped that salt shed replacement. So our footprint changed quite a bit as a result of that. So history, this is originally an old Kent property and Bishop Pit and Taylor property from the 50s, 53, 54 era. It sits at 469 Mammoth Road. We butt Mammoth Road to the planned east. We abut residential properties to the planned south and west. And we abut the headwater tributary to the Cohos Brook to the planned north. Currently, the facility is very undersized, functionally obsolete. We can't put all our equipment that we need to do winter maintenance operations inside, nor do we have enough storage capabilities for some of our maintenance equipment. It's very energy insufficient. It's potentially structurally unsound. We've had to do all sorts of things to keep it together. But we've been waiting a long time and finally got capital money from the state to build it, so we're hoping to move forward. The old patrol shed is about 2,500 square feet, and the new one is going to be about 6,400 square feet. So we did finally receive capital improvement approval in 2001, and then it was revised in 2021, and then revised in 2023. Our facility operations there, right now we have 6 employees, full-time positions, I should say. We only have 3 at the moment that work there. We have 3 dump trucks, 1 loader, pickup truck. We have a fuel site that this project is going to eliminate, so it's going to remove the existing diesel fuel pumps that are there. In the wintertime, we have up to 10 additional hired trucks that come and work for us. This facility maintains Route 28 from Manchester to Derry, 28A from Manchester to Londonderry, 128 Mammoth Road, as you know, from Manchester to Wyndham, and 102 from Hudson to Derry, and 3A from in Litchfield, Hillcrest Road, Peabody Road, Smith Lane, the Exit 4 park line. There's a lot of maintenance responsibility out of this facility. 83 total lane miles.
With
So-
3 full-time guys.
And 3 current employees, yes. 6, we're supposed to have 6, but only 3. We're doing the best we can.
No, I know.
It's tough.
I know.
So project specifics, yeah, we have an architect signed up that is working on this plans. That architect has Ty and Bond working on it with DuBois King and Artisan Engineering as the structural. Current design, that's, like I said, we came here with some preliminary plans for you just to give you an idea what we're hoping to do. But we're only probably 50 to 60% there. We really cited the building and did some stuff, but there's more work to be done. In terms of schedule, we're hoping to advertise sometime this fall, put it out to bid this winter. Maybe we'll get lower prices, knock on wood.
Yeah.
And then, obviously we have to go to governing council and get approved by governing council. And then, as soon as winter ends, assuming the I's have been dotted, T's crossed, then we'll try to break ground in the spring of 2025. And then if all works out as the way we hope, it'll be done by November of 25, and then we can move back in before winter starts again. So the patrol shed, like I said, is 80 by 80, 6,400 square feet. It'll provide adequate crew quarter space, more than right now, the foreman's office and the crew quarters and the bathroom are all in the same room. There's a door for the bathroom, of course, but it's very obvious. But anyway, it'll provide a more usable and workable space for those people that those workers that have to be there. In terms of utilities, we're going to probably upgrade our electric from single phase to 3-phase off of Mammoth Road. We'll have an outside wood boiler that'll be installed, like we've had in many other facilities. Telephone cable. We'll tap into the natural gas on Mammoth Road. And then if we're lucky and can secure the right easements, we'll hopefully get public water too. So fire alarm system with a modern building, sprinkler system, and an emergency generator with it fueled by the natural gas. So that's all I got for you.
Fantastic. I'll start with the staff.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, again, I did have an opportunity to take a look at the preliminary plans. As Gary said, they were very preliminary, and I suspected that, Gary. Again, some of the items that I make note of, and that you'll walk away with a copy of my memo, where to get a hold of me. Again, some of the property lines they're identified as approximate, so again, the concern would be, can it be constructed in the footprint that you're showing, and making sure that everything is on your property, obviously. And I know,
we will.
Yeah, I totally, and that was, and the other item that I had noticed as well, Gary, was, it looks like you are working on connecting into water back on, into Buckingham.
Buckingham, yeah, or through
Sterling or some.
One of those. There's 2 different options there
Yeah.
that we're looking at, but we're in negotiations with some of the property owners to see if they'll give us an easement. I mean, our original hope was to try to run something down 128 to get Pennachuck to connect the dots between the Smith Lane and Buckingham, but they didn't seem to be very receptive to that idea.
But there is something that goes by here. your shop. We can talk later. So, I have comments, again, I know both these gentlemen pretty well, and I have all the faith in the world, though, again, they're non-binding comments anyways, so.
Yep.
Thank you.
You got the nicest side of John all night.
It's a win.
Somebody.
Mike.
Hey, I'm all set, John. Put it perfect.
All right, fantastic.
Yeah, Rich, where's she at the talk?
All right, I'll bring it to the board. Board, do we have any input?
You guys are living on the right side of the board, of the law, I'll tell you that. Is this a steel building? I can't read it.
No, it's going to be a stick frame
I didn't
building.
bring my glasses. Sorry.
It's a stick frame
Stick?
building, yeah.
So I just want to let you know, Londonderry School Department has suffered for the past 45 years with that roof style. Pretty much guaranteed to leak, guaranteed to freeze up, and good luck with that.
Yeah, I don't like it either, to be honest with you. And that's one of the things that,
Yeah, I know it's a cartoon drawing, but
Yeah.
still, I'm just,
yeah, that step shed,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not a fan either.
yeah, Londonderry's had, it's been thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in repairs and whatnot as a result of that kind of roof, so.
Right.
Buyer beware.
Well, it's the architect originally, the concept was to put some windows up there and provide natural light.
That's what they told the school department.
Yeah, and the first phase we went through, the preliminary engineering design phase we went through, I said, why don't we just do a standard ridge? And they came back with this and the design, we're still in the design development stage, and I'm probably going to provide that recommendation, and maybe I have to put my foot down the next
If you
time.
need any ammunition, I'd be glad to go to one of your meetings.
Thank
But,
you.
yeah, good, I mean, good, good luck with it, and be a good neighbor, and you guys know how to do that. It's not, it's not, you're really not changing anything other than the building. Your
Right,
operations
it's really
will stay the
doesn't,
same.
yeah, it may not even be a substantial change in use, I mean, but we are changing the building, so.
Sure. Understood.
And this being a governmental entity, there is no action required from the board. We certainly thank you for coming in to let us know, and the only request is to work with our able staff. And they can, I'm sure that you know each other, and hopefully it'll be a structure that can withstand weather and so forth. But,
Yeah, hopefully last another 70 years, yeah.
yeah, the old buildings last longer than the new ones.
Anything from you two?
No.
I think we're good, gentlemen. My only comment would be, I see you've got some lawn area up in front of this garage here. I don't know, maybe we can relocate some of that landscaping to the Mammoth Road side of things and hide some of that sand pile you got there. That's all I got.
You don't like the looks of the sand pile? Okay.
I've looked at it for 32 years.
It's a great spot for a campaign sign.
It's great.
It hides what's going on behind
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
Unless you want to look at the spreader rack. you always want.
Outside of that, gentlemen, I think this board is good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Appreciate
Sorry for the wait.
time.
Sorry for the wait.
No problem.
All right. Other business. Mike, you got anything?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair. I know it's late, but I thought that the right way to go about this was to preview tonight some proposed changes that we have to the site plan regulations. It requires a bit of noticing in advance of a public hearing. So with the meeting next week, I thought it would be good to just preview it very briefly tonight. With your permission, Mr. Chair, workshop it next week. Make any required changes. I know that John has some thoughts, some actually very good thoughts that will help, and then conduct a public hearing in September, assuming the board wants to move forward with this. But by way of introduction and background, I would just say that I've been involved in town since 2018 in the development review process. You've been, I don't know, for at least that long. And you've probably heard all the same complaints that I've heard about our development review process, both the design review process and the review process once it gets to formal consideration. I don't know about you, but I'm getting sick of hearing the same complaints. And so, you know, I think that I give you a lot of credit for, you know, pushing this forward. You've made it very clear that this is one of your priorities. And I think that I'm proud of, you know, this is probably not what's going to be adopted by the board. I hope that there's a good discussion and that there are modifications. But I'm proud of how we got here. And like I said, I look forward to the discussion with the board.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just add to that, you know, I think this is a good start. I'm looking forward to board's input on this and John's input, and, you know, the public, anybody involved. But I think it's a step in the right direction, and we can have some good conversation about what we want to see. Either, you know, this is either perfect or we would like a little bit more changes here, but I think it's a good time to look at it all, you know, and go through this and see what we need to change.
It's a good start.
Yeah.
Because I think we have to, well, listen to, you know, basically our customers and then, you know, go from there. And I think a lot of it is not to upset the apple cart too much, but yet acknowledge that where we can be a little more, quote unquote, streamlined. And, but it's a very confusing thing, I think, for most, you know,
It is.
applicants between the formal review process and design review. In fact, we've had also recommended by Stephen Buckley from the Hampshire Municipal Association to have a, you know, conceptual discussion before every plan so that they know what's going on. That requires actually a zoning change, so.
No, I agree.
But by statutorily, we have permission to do that, so.
That's exactly right, and I agree with you, Mr. Vice Chair, that you know, the goal is not to you know, redo our regulations. I think some tweaks, and particularly having some written things that we can point to,
Written guidelines type
written
thing,
guidelines,
yeah.
so that we can. A lot of this comes down to communication, and if we have something written down and we can say, no, actually, take a look here. This says exactly what you should expect, and that's why we're behaving the way that we're behaving. It would assist the board, I think. It would assist us, and ultimately it assists the customers, as you pointed out, Mr. Vice Chair. This is in the back of the room. There are printed copies in the back of the room for the public today. We'll get it up on the website so that the public can take a look at this in advance of next week, and make sure that everybody has a chance to get eyes on it.
Great.
I really like that word customer. I think it's important to note that fact that that's not necessarily a change, but something that's come more to the forefront than it has in the past. And there's actually two customers. One are the abutters to a project for our purposes. But the other one is also the applicant, because the applicant is a landowner too, and the applicant is also paying taxes. And I think it's important that we're bringing that word customer to the forefront, understanding that we have both of those masters that we're trying to satisfy. And then we have, obviously, the staff who's trying to make sure that the applicant is following the rules and regulations to protect the entire town. And I like what just happened then. I love that word, and I think it's something that we could continue to use to help refresh our minds that yes, we have customers here every meeting. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And what makes it easy for them, it was like listening to them, because, I mean, times change, you know, and so what worked 5 years ago, 10 years ago, there's gonna be, you know, some modification.
And I'd like to hear some of the complaints that you guys have heard, personally.
Well, the calls come to me.
Well, again, I want to hear, I want to hear what they are, though.
We can discuss those at the next meeting.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we should at least give it a good thorough discussion.
I think it's a good step. It might not solve anything, but anytime you open up documents and rehash them and think about them and understand, well, what's the purpose of that? Why do we have that here? Why don't we have that here? What's the unintended consequence of that particular thing that we've noticed over the past 5 years or whatever? Sometimes it's nothing. Sometimes it's, you end up closing the book and say, yep, we're good. But it's certainly worth the conversation to open it up, take a look at it, see what we got.
Conditions change over time, and it's always good to just refresh, relook, and
Yeah.
just
Absolutely.
make things, sure things are fresh.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it apply to the time we're in, yeah.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair, on that.
Anything else from the board?
So, Mr. Chair, as a matter of record, I'd like to note that tonight there were multiple sessions of public comment that the general public used to their advantage, and
We had 7.
we were glad,
No, 3.
we were glad to offer the general public multiple times to have public input
Thank you.
at tonight's meeting, so
Thank
thank
you.
you.
I think before we wrap up, the last thing I'd ask Mike is, you know, while we're going down, this road of just looking at our regulations, if we could look into, you know, what it looks like with, adding a third-party review, an additional third-party reviewer to our process, however that looks, be it a RFP or what, but I'd like to look into that as well,
We already have 2.
like 3.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide the board with some information about that. I think that, right now there are 2. It's probably in the spirit of keeping things fresh, you know, time to look at that and just make sure that the board's comfortable, and so absolutely happy to provide that information.
Great.
There's probably a limited number between those that, actually, work for, the applicants bring in plans. They might not want to, do the review. I know when we did that, it was back, Giannis, and it was just finding what outfits that had no conflicts.
Correct. That's a whole nother.
That's a, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, just like the previous conversation, no reason to not open up the book.
Yep.
And read the pages again and see what we get. Throw stuff against the wall, see what sticks or whatever, so, yeah.
Absolutely. Awesome. Anything else from the board? Looking for a motion.
Move to adjourn.
So second. I'm looking for a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.